We will call the April Board of Trustees meeting to order. First, let's recognize the miracle that all the trustees are on the phone and on a Zoom call. I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself.
Agreed.
And we're going to have this meeting in Zoom. It's a very challenging time for everybody, and this is another unique meeting that we'll have. But I think, given the tools and the great work by the administration to make this possible, and I thank President Thrasher, your entire staff, to facilitate our ability to have this call. I know we had a couple of trial runs, and I think we have everybody, which is a great start. So I appreciate it. Lena, why don't we start with calling the roll?
Trustee Alvarez.
Here.
Trustee Ballard.
Here.
Trustee Burr.
Here.
Trustee Bazette.
Here.
Trustee Chicken.
Here.
Trustee Duda.
Here.
Trustee Gonzalez.
Here.
Trustee Henderson.
Here.
Trustee Levin.
Here.
Trustee Mateer. Trustee Mateer. I think I saw that he came on, but Trustee Sasser.
Here.
Trustee Sembler.
Here.
Trustee Thiel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Lena, did Trustee Mateer show up again, or you'll see if he comes in?
I see. I don't think his.
Volume is not on. I'll text him.
Yeah. I see him.
Well, thanks everybody again. I think we've know how to use the Zoom. You can mute your mic if you need to. If you're not speaking, just want to hear. You can also mute your camera if you need to do something you don't want to have on camera. But I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone being here. I think it's our first full Zoom board meeting. I'd like to say I wish it was going to be our last. I don't think it will be. I think we'll probably be, our next one in June will probably follow suit with this one, but we'll keep praying that the country starts to turn around and our first responders and our healthcare workers continue to do what they can, and that all our citizens do what they can to limit this terrible pandemic in our country. Our orders of business start with approval of minutes, and minutes were distributed from the March 23rd, 20 conference call minutes. I think everyone has it. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
No.
Any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will stand approved. At every meeting, we have a public comment section. We've tried to, there are, based on my records, we probably have close to 50 people who have called in and are listening to this recorded or listening to this Zoom meeting. In my records, I have about 6 people who have asked to speak. I will call on those folks. The same rules apply, 3 minutes to speak. And when I get through with the ones that I have, if there are others, then we'll try to communicate to make sure anyone who is here to have a public comment that they're allowed to speak. So I'm going to try to talk with the ones I have and do the best I can. The first one I have is Vincenza Antonetta Berardo, Chief Negotiator with UFF, FSU, and GAU. Wants to speak, Ray, the Graduate Assistants Union.
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
You're
Yes, ma'am.
recognized.
Okay, great. Hi, yes, I'm Vincenza. Good morning. 1 week ago today, down to this exact hour, FSU and the Graduate Assistants Union concluded negotiations on a memorandum of understanding concerning the impacts of COVID-19 on the graduate assistant population. The GAU is very pleased with how efficient, productive, and civil the process was. Bargaining negotiations aren't always so smooth, as I'm sure we all remember, and it was reassuring to be reminded of what this process can look like when it's approached in the spirit of mutual cooperation and benefit. When FSU and the GAU come together with a mind to solve a problem, that problem doesn't stand a chance. GAU's priority in impact bargaining was the safety of its bargaining unit, and this was obviously FSU's #1 priority also. We appreciate that wholeheartedly. My hope is that going into normal bargaining, if anything can be termed normal these days, the university maintains this attitude of problem solving. GAU understands the extraordinary circumstances that the university is contending with right now, and we absolutely consider this when planning for bargaining. After all, we have no interest wasting time demanding things the university cannot give. However, we of course have the best interest of our bargaining unit at heart, and GAs who regularly make an annual salary of below the federal poverty line are especially hard hit by these times. The jobs we pick up for extra hours have all but ceased to exist. Many of our parents and loved ones whom we depend on for financial assistance now have financial woes of their own, all while we shoulder the increased costs we've incurred switching to working from home. Ultimately, protecting our bargaining unit is GAU's #1 priority. We understand that the university has 1,000 other problems right now searching for solutions. But hopefully, as we go into bargaining this summer, FSU will remember who has worked tirelessly throughout these trying times to continue the important academic work of the university uninterrupted. The GAs enrolled at FSU right now are upholding ordinary operations for the FSU undergraduates while enduring extraordinary circumstances themselves. We hope FSU keeps this in mind going forward and comes to the bargaining table with us in the spirit of restoring the GAs to more normal circumstances themselves. Thank you guys for your time.
Vincenza, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments and appreciate you giving credit on the first round of negotiations that just concluded. And it's nice to know they went well. And we only hear things when they really go wrong. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know we all do. Next.
Great. Thank you, guys.
I recognize Adela Gadimi, president of UFF's GSU, wants to speak, but hasn't specified the topic. Adela, if I'm saying that right, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to give an additional perspective of what we're going through as graduate assistants here at FSU at the moment from our role as students and as employees for our university, because we, like everyone else, are certainly hurting right now. As you heard from Vincenza, many of us had outside employment to try and supplement our income, and those streams have halted basically overnight. And in the midst of the stress of not being able to see our families, support our families, or people that have children having to struggle to juggle transitioning to teaching online, maintaining their education, and caring for their kids at home and making sure their education is taken care of, we've had to hustle and try and make sure all of these moving pieces don't cease existing. And it's placed a tremendous amount of stress on all sides of our experience. It's been very overwhelming, and it's going to have a lot of longer lasting repercussions. And believe me, we understand that there are dozens and dozens of things that are being problem solved simultaneously, but we are one of the populations being the hardest hit on all fronts. And I wanted to offer the perspective that we have been communicating with a lot of graduate assistants whose research right now in terms of what they're doing for work and for their personal degree is going to be, the timelines they were originally on completely have ceased to exist the way they were before. A lot of people are going to need extra time. They're going to need extra support to be able to do that. I know I can tell you personally, for me, I'm having to restructure my entire dissertation right now because my original plan for how I was going to complete it and the data collection I still needed to do, it's not feasible in the current world we're living in for me to be able to do that. In addition, you know, we've had this unexpected hit of the fact that a lot of us were planning to travel for conferences, which, you know, is imperative for us to do to be able to showcase our research and network in our fields and hope to get jobs. And, you know, with airlines not giving that, giving you credit, it's great that we have something to lean on, but I can't pay my bills that I currently have with, you know, travel credits that who knows when I'll be able to use in the future. And this story is not unique. We've been hearing from lots of people, and part of that does come down to the fees as well. Like, in addition to the fact that we're not able to use a lot of the services we originally were when the university collected fees. Moving forward, I would strongly, you know, request that you consider how fees are going to be collected moving forward for all students, since we're all being so financially hit and burdened by all of this. And I want to thank you up front for the fact that I know this is an unprecedented situation and there's no guidebook for how to get this done. But we look forward to your leadership and your care for all of us and trying to figure out how we navigate this moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Adela. Appreciate those comments. We got a few more. They're all seem to be graduate student oriented. I just ask that please if you have any fresh points to make them. We'd love to hear them. If there's more, if it's echoing things that have been said before, just endorse what's been previously said. But the next one I have on the list is Michael Yost. He's here to FSU Grad Assistance.
Oh, I didn't make a request to speak. I do endorse the two previous comments, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I have Haley Lemoine, Lemoine, PhD student, wants to speak on student fees.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Thank you very much. You're recognized, Haley.
I'm Haley. I'm a first-year doctoral student here at FSU, and I am speaking about student fees. I wanted to start off by saying that in this difficult and very uncertain time, I am very grateful for the measures that the FSU administration and you, the Board of Trustees, are taking to ensure the health and safety of all the faculty and students and staff while also trying to keep operations running as smoothly as possible. So thank you. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of all the students, undergraduate and graduate students alike, who are currently paying for services for which they do not have full access. Student fees here at FSU are, for the most part, already substantially higher than at similarly ranked public schools. For example, in my situation, were I to have been a graduate student this semester at the University of Florida, taking the same number of credits, I would have paid about half of the student fees that I paid here at FSU. Whereas at the University of Virginia, I would have paid $0 in student fees. As a graduate assistant, over 10% of my income this past school year went to student fees. Even under normal circumstances, this is not just an inconvenience, it's a burden. Due to the virus, this burden has gotten heavier for many of us. I know you guys are likely included in that. Parents, spouses, and other family members losing their jobs and often their health insurance affects the financial stability of graduate and undergraduate students, and I am no exception. Given this, requiring students to pay the full amount of student fees this summer when they won't have access to many of the services these fees are supposed to cover exacerbates the financial stress many students and their families are already experiencing. I'm speaking specifically to the student facilities use fee, the athletics fee, and the transportation fee. In some ways, asking students to pay these fees not only requires payment for services that will never be rendered, but it encourages students to go against orders from state and federal governments to shelter at home by showing students that you believe it's important for students to pay for services that require them to leave their homes to access the buildings and modes of transportation for which they're paying. I urge you to reimburse the cost of student fees for services we can't use during this pandemic and seriously consider reducing the cost of fees in the future. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. If you're not speaking, it may be helpful to everyone else to keep your phones muted. There's a lot of background noise. Thank you, Haley, and we appreciate that input. I know that we're continuing to evaluate how to properly assess and move forward with the fees and other charges during this time.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Bless you. Next, I have Catherine Moore, FSU Graduate Students United.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
We can,
Okay.
Catherine, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Catherine Moore. I'm a fourth-year PhD student. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the research that I do, partially because I think it's pretty cool, but also because I'm worried that I won't be able to complete it. I study 18th and 19th century French literature. My dissertation expands the boundaries of what we would usually consider to be called literature and includes, among other things, primary sources like letters. These letters are incredibly precious and fascinating historical objects. However, because they were written by women and because they deal with rather mundane day-to-day so-called women's issues like menstruation, childbearing, and household management, most of them haven't been published or even digitized. For several of these women, I will be one of the only researchers in the world looking at the importance of the writings that they left behind. However, in order to access these precious and fragile primary sources, I have to be able to access several small archives scattered across France. I was supposed to spend 6 weeks this summer foraging in the archives, digging for the final puzzle pieces that would tie my dissertation together. Unfortunately, due to rather obvious circumstances, I will be unable to go to the archives this summer, which means that when I'm due to graduate next May, my dissertation will be incomplete. Modern languages is not a department that usually has money to fund an extra year of research when it's necessary, but an additional year is exactly what I would need. Time to spend months in the archives next summer and time to integrate those sources into my dissertation before I defend. I know that some people don't think that the humanities research is very important, but the university believed in me enough and believed in my project's importance to not only give me an assistantship, but to also give me a legacy fellowship so that I could share these women's stories with the world. I, like many others, cannot fund a 6th year of graduate study out of pocket. And it would be a shame if I were either forced to, by unhappy circumstance, to defend a dissertation that I know is incomplete because the university was unable to afford just 9 more months of funding. I know that these are uncertain times for everyone, but I urge the Board of Trustees to prioritize those graduate assistants in whom the university has already invested, whose research is already underway, and who have invested significant time and care into this university already. I urge you to prioritize securing funding for the GAs who are already here and who need more time to complete their research. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I mean, obviously this field of study is important to us. We offer the degree, and we'll follow up with student affairs and our provost to talk about what we're going to do for these situations, because I think they're important. But thank you for your input.
Thank you.
That's the last one that I know has asked to speak. Is there anyone else, any other members from the public who would like to offer comments today? All right, hearing none, we'll close the public comment section of today's meeting. We'll move to our business, and we start each of our meetings with a conflict of interest statement, ethics statement. I'll read this. I begin our meeting with a reminder to board members about our ethics policy and obligations imposed by that policy and the Florida law. Trustees are public officers of the state of Florida who are invested with the public trust and appointed as fiduciaries of the university. The Board of Trustees ethics policy that governs our conduct requires us to disclose any conflicts of interest present for any trustee, trustee's family member, or trustee's business associate, as those terms are defined by the policy. Having reviewed the agenda for today's meeting, and having had the opportunity to consult with the general counsel and the ethics officer about any potential actual or perceived conflict, does any trustee wish to disclose any matter that may impact his or her ability to discuss or vote on the agenda item? Hearing none, we'll assume we're free to go forward. So we're going to start our meeting as we normally do with President Thrasher's report. And then, you know, we didn't have committee meetings. We usually have a series of committee meetings leading to this. We're going to conduct these today's meeting almost as a committee of the whole. Each committee chair and their staff person, their member of the administration will do presentations. If we need action item, we'll take action item. Instead of in the committee, we'll just take action with the entire board as a committee as a whole. And I think we'll be served well by that, given this format we have to deal with. Obviously, at the end of this meeting or after this experience, before our next meeting, which may also be done via Zoom, if there's any input or thoughts of a better way to do things, we're wide open for those suggestions. I'll remind you of that also at the end of the process. One thing is I got to remember to keep looking into the camera, you know, not into the picture. And I was looking at our president on board. So giving that start, we'll do our best we can, and we'll start with our president's report. President Thrasher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Burr. I appreciate it. Let me start out by just saying to you all, you know, we've done a bunch of these already on our staff level, but I want to thank Lena particularly for all the work she did and her team, Jimmy and all the gang over there who helped put these things together. They're not easy to do. They require some understanding of what Zoom is about and all that. I have to tell you, I didn't know how to spell Zoom a month ago. Now I know a little bit about it, and as all of our staff does. So, but Lena, thank you very much. We owe you a debt. And this is going to work out great, I think. Let me start out by also welcoming John Levin. Brent, you'll appreciate. I'm sure you know he's a Pike, in a long line of Pike leaders that have been involved at Florida State University. We're happy for John, and we thank Evan Steinberg who did a fabulous job this past year. He was a great communicator. He stayed in touch with our staff, and Evan did a fine job. And I know we'll graduate in May, and we're looking forward to his great things ahead of him. Let me just say, and I'm gonna give a kind of a 40,000 foot overview of where we are and where we've been the last 6 weeks. And then I'm gonna allow this incredible staff to tell you some of the things that they've done. You know, you hear about a lot of the things that we've done, but as I told the chairman and said this several times, the underbelly of the decisions we make are incredible. I mean, they require a lot of attention, a lot of detail. And I'll say it again, and I'll say before I finish, your staff has done a fabulous job. They really have, of leading us through these very, very interesting and difficult times. Just a brief history. You remember, I don't know if maybe you don't, it was March 1st when Governor DeSantis declared a state of emergency for our state of Florida. And I think over the next 2 weeks, things started moving very rapidly. We had already, probably before that, understood that we were going to have some issues in our international programs, and had already begun to set in place the closing down of our Florence program, and later on, of course, Valencia, London, and Panama. All of them have been closed, by the way, for the entire rest of the summer. Jim Pitts and his team in international programs have done a great job. We had a lot of students over there who had to come home, a lot of logistics in that regard. Again, a lot of details that went into making that happen to keep these students and the faculty members and the staff over there in those programs safe. Jim and his team did a great job, along with Sally and certainly Kyle's team, in understanding the ramifications of that, financial ramifications, as well as just the logistics of getting people home. You know, about that time, just to remind you, we were finishing the legislative session on March the 13th, was in fact the last day. They did extend, in order to sign the budget, another week into the next week. But we were working on that up until the last. Kathleen will give you kind of an overview of that when she gets her chance to talk. But again, that was going on when all of this was going on. So also around March 16th, if you remember, is when spring break was supposed to start. And we had already understood that we were going to have some difficult times ahead of us. And so during that time, we had made a decision to ask our students to leave campus for spring break, take what they needed with them if they lived in residence halls, and not to come back. And during that next week, but prior to that, Sally and her great team and the IT folks, the distant learning, had already started preparing our staff to go online and teach remotely. And it sounds kind of simple to say you get up in front of a camera and do that, but I have to tell you, a lot of our faculty members had not done that. So they required some training and some assistance in doing that. Some others obviously had done it before. We did learn a lot when we had Hurricane Michael, when we taught remote from on some of the classes as a result of those things that happened over there in Panama City. But our staff, in my opinion, have really, our faculty have really stepped up. They have embraced this, and I think are doing a great job. I've been online a couple of classes, and faculty members are teaching just like they always have. The students are participating, and I think the participation has been extraordinarily high. Sally, again, I think could probably give you a little bit more information about that. Of course, after that, things really started to happen rapidly. We started making decisions about travel restrictions, working remotely for our own staff. Certainly, we canceled just about everything that you can cancel. I'm not sure there's anything left to cancel, at least between now and the summer. including our May graduation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we also had to cancel all of our spring sporting events. And David, I think, will be able to give you a little insight into that and some of the things that may be ahead of us in the future in regard to that. I wanted to also tell you that we do have a process, and while I know some people may think that the president or the provost makes decisions in kind of a vacuum. That ain't true. I promise you that. We have a great staff, as you know, and they're involved in just about every decision we make, and have been for the last 6 weeks in all of these decisions. I mean everybody. So I hope when they get a chance to talk, you'll certainly feel free to ask questions, and if there are details that we don't cover. We just to give you some idea of the process, Chairman Burr and I have regular calls as always, probably more so recently. He is on a lot of our calls with the Board of Governors. They are having regular meetings now every Monday at 4:30. And we're all on that to get updates from Chairman Sid Kitson and Marshall Kreiser and his team. Our own staff meetings have continued throughout this process. As I said, we do them on Zoom now, and we have them every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, just as we always have. And a lot of what we talk about here today are talked about in those meetings, and we make decisions regarding that. All of our senior staff, Sally, Kyle, Amy, Carolyn, Gary, et cetera, also have weekly meetings, sometimes daily, with their counterparts in the university system. So we're understanding what some of the best practices are at other places, learning some things about that. One of the things the Board of Governors has tried to talk about and get us focused on, frankly, is that there are certain decisions that are system-wide, that we ought to be making those decisions together, and that we ought to be on the same page. And we've tried to do that, and working with Marshall when it comes to closing, when it comes to graduation exercises, when it comes to the continuation of teaching remote through Summer C. All of those things we have cleared and talked to the Board of Governors about. David also has been on conference calls with athletic directors from the Atlantic Coast Conference, as well as the state of Florida. I have been on almost a weekly, sometimes more than that, call with the presidents of the ACC to talk about various issues affecting the entire conference. We've also been in touch with our friends in Washington, our Congress people also, and working with some of the issues that have come out of the federal government, particularly, I guess, the resources that the federal government is providing the universities around the country. So we have been involved in a lot of process, I guess, and a lot of discussions, and I think that's an important thing. And I'll close by saying something about that. Some of the recent decisions you'll hear about today, of course, is that this week we made the decision to go remote for the rest of the summer in Summer C. That's our largest summer enrollment. Sally will report on that and some of the aspects of that. We've been working closely with the Board of Governors and others in regard to the distribution of funds that we will get from the federal government. Unless Kyle has got something overnight, I don't think we've gotten our first tranche of money, which will be about, I think, $7.5 million of the first $15 million we get of the first $30 million we're supposed to get. We also this week videoed our graduation exercises, which will be on May the 2nd at 2 o'clock. We'll advertise that and already have started on that. And it's going to be, I think, a really good opportunity for our kids at home with their families to hopefully understand how proud we all are of them and appreciate all they've done during this very difficult time and the sacrifices they've made that they've had to give up in this very important last year of their time at Florida State. Chairman Burr taped a message to them, as well as Evan Steinberg. Mark Ziegler, one of our distinguished longtime professors, gave I think a pep talk type of commencement speech about it was Florida State centric, and that's the kind of theme I wanted to make sure that we provided our graduates. We have been in consultation this past week or a week and a half, I guess, last week with our graduate assistants, as you heard. We're certainly working on some of those issues. And we just had a consultation this past week with our faculty bargaining team also, which is required by law. And let me just say this about the last thing about, I hope you'll let us know and give your feedback whether we're communicating properly. One of the things that Browning and I have talked about are ways in which we can convey the messages that we need to convey to our faculty, our staff, our students, and their families in a way that doesn't overwhelm them, but certainly gives them enough information. I guess one of the things that either Amy or Kyle will talk about is the fact that we came up with a plan. They came up with a great plan to help some of our students who had to leave campus but leave their belongings behind, get their belongings either back to where they want them to go, their home, or store them in Tallahassee waiting for the semester in the fall to start. That was a really unique plan, and we've communicated that in a lot of detail, but it's another example of the kind of things our staff, I think, are doing to make this as painless as possible, even though there's obviously a lot of pain. But we are communicating. I hope we're communicating enough with you. If we're not, please let us know. We'll make sure that we continue to do that in a more efficient fashion if necessary. Let me just say in closing again, you know, I'm in my 6th year now here, and we've been through a lot. We've had a lot of different things that have challenged us, but I have never, ever seen such incredible strength and resilience of our family, our FSU family. I'm talking about everybody. You know, we've had people come in and do online presentations from New York and different places, different things going on. Everybody is stepping up to the plate, and I truly believe that that this university and the culture we have here, because of your leadership, is brought us together in very, very difficult and uncertain times. And I think our response to this pandemic has been no different than in the past. They've stepped up to the plate. You'd be very proud. I know you're proud of the team that's here, that work hard every day and are doing a fabulous job in getting through these very difficult issues. What you're going to hear today, though, I want to emphasize, is a picture of where we are today. I promise you, and you all probably are as aware of this as we are, in an hour, things might change, or in 2 hours, they might change, 3 hours, or next week. Things are changing rapidly, and we have to be there to make sure that we're on top of those changes. Having said all that, knowing where we are today, knowing where our financial situation is, which I think is sound, by the way, I think our students have responded appropriately, our faculty have, and I'm optimistic about the future. I want to open this university back up when it's feasible to do so, health-wise and safety-wise, but in the best interest of all of our folks here. And if that's in the fall, we'll do it. If something happens that says we can't do it, but we'll understand that also. But I'm very optimistic, given where we are,
we lost him.
That hopefully we can do that. Anyway, I hope you'll listen to our staff. They've got some great reports, and as always, I appreciate your leadership, your support of our staff and of Florida State University. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, President. Before we open it up for questions, I do want to echo your support and your endorsement for our administration and our faculty. You mentioned that we're having a virtual graduation ceremony on May the 2nd. If you just think about the effort it took to get everyone, and almost everyone who was scheduled to graduate were able to complete their classes, finish their schoolwork, and be there ready to graduate by May 2nd, which is that in and of itself is a great accomplishment, given that we started this in mid-March. So I think the entire faculty, the entire staff's work in getting us up and still educating our students, which is our #1 mission in doing so, has been a wonderful job and a great job. Let me open up and see if there's any other questions or comments for President Thrasher.
Yeah, Brent, I've got a question.
Brent.
And maybe it comes up later. John, can you walk us through, because the biggest question I'm getting these days are, what about fall? I mean, we know the summer is gone. What about fall? I know today we don't know the answer to that question, but are there certain, can you kind of walk us through the timing of that decision? I mean, is July 1 our drop dead date where we can't? So I guess that's maybe question one. I'll throw in a second question and listen to the answer too, and that is funding. How does our funding look for next year? And do we need to be making plans, which I think is part of Kyle's presentation today? You know, what does next year look like if there's a 10% cut or a 20% cut? Or so
Right.
I'll kick it over to you.
As far as next year goes, the fall goes, I think somewhere in the July timeframe would be a time that we would have to know one way or the other. Maybe before that, maybe after that slightly, but in that timeframe certainly, in order to prepare for orientation or to prepare for classes, all that. So we've got a little time, and I'm not going to say that you know, there are obstacles out there. It's really going to depend, I think, a lot on how the health and safety aspects of all this turn around. And I think we're all waiting to see that. Hopefully the plateau is there. You know, nobody thinks we're going to have a vaccine, but there may be some treatments that are available. There are going to be some testing issues that we're going to have to deal with. A lot of logistics out there, Brent, before I would feel comfortable opening the university. But as I said to Marshall Kreiser the other day and the brother presidents, I don't think it ought to be John Thrasher's decision to open this university. There ought to be a lot of folks involved in that, from the university system to the governor and everybody else. You know, there's a big debate going on right now whether they reopen the K through 12 system. And I think there are people on both sides of that. But at least by July, I think by July, we'll have a much clearer picture about what we need to do and can do and safely bring our students back. So there are a lot of decisions have to be made by that. As far as financial goes, we're in good shape right now. We're in good shape. I will say this though, in respect to building a budget, and Kyle will get into the details of this. First and foremost, the governor hadn't signed this year's budget yet. In fact, he hadn't even gotten it yet. He has till July 1st to sign it. My guess is he's going to wait as long as he can, simply because he wants to see kind of where we are. There may be vetoes involved that he wants to look at as a result of some of the things. Clearly, our revenue estimates are going to be hard, given the fact that March and April are going to be really down. So whether we have a special session to make some adjustments in that before we start the fall, I don't know that either. The governor hadn't opined on that. Neither has the legislative leadership. But as far as Florida State goes right now, with the federal assistance that we're going to get, which is about $30 million, plus if the governor does sign the bill, that the budget from this last session, we will be okay going into the fall. I can assure you of that. After that, Brent, depending on whether we have in classes remote or not, that'll have a big impact on the budget for next year, for the 2021 budget. So a lot of variables out there. Bob Sasser has been briefed on a lot of this by Kyle, I know, and they're probably going to be able to give you more details than that. I'll just say this, right now we're in sound shape. We've not had to furlough anybody. We've not had to lay off anybody. Even though we have people working remotely, they are working. And my goal is to try to keep that as long as we can. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Thank you, President Thrasher. I will add to that, you know, the first tranche of money that we're getting from the feds is really student focused. All that money really goes to reimburse students and to help the student side of it. So we're handling it that way. Then we'll hopefully get reimbursed for some of the financial impacts the university has had as well. But any other questions for President Thrasher? I think a lot of information will come out through the reports. So if we can, why don't we start with our Academic Affairs Committee. Jim Henderson is our chair. Sally McCrory is the provost there. Jim, you have anything you want to say? You want to turn it over to Sally?
You know, Ed, you know, and John and others, thank you very much for the opportunity to serve on this committee. very deep respect for the mission of the committee and the leadership we have there. It's the business of our business, and very fortunate. I've always admired Sally's delivery and report and her passion for what she does there. So her ability to execute that, her ability to communicate that to the BOG, to the state, really works some miracles of what we can do to continue to drive the university. So I look forward to working with her and the committee members there to report to you our progress. Sally?
Sally?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Trustee Henderson, and thank you, everyone. It's great to see all of you in your little boxes there. As you can imagine, the many, many thousands of classes that we have that are being taught exactly like this, it's quite a challenge, not only for the faculty and instructional staff, but also for our students. But it's been remarkably successful, as the president mentioned. We've been very, very busy shifting all kinds of things around at the university so that we can prepare to deliver remotely, and we've addressed all the many complex issues that are related to that. Things that you don't think about until you start down one path and you realize, oh, it has many, many branches to deal with as well. Of course, we wanted to always maintain our focus on student success. That's why we are who we are. That's why we're number 18, best university in the country. And I think that's why all of us are so very proud to be associated with Florida State. So always that's top of my mind. What are we doing to help our students succeed? We want to also help our faculty present an excellent quality of instruction and provide them the kind of support that they also need to be able to do that and do it well. As President Thrasher said, many of our faculty had not really taught online or taught remotely through Zoom or some other means. It was quite a change for lots and lots of our faculty. Being a primarily residential university, most of our students have had some online courses, but not, that's all that they're taking. And so it's a big change for everybody. Here, I won't go into all the details, of course, but here are some, a few statistics that might help you understand the scale of the efforts that our faculty, staff, and students have gone through in the last few weeks. Over 10,000 class sections for this spring semester that we're still in were converted to remote delivery. Think about that. 10,000 class sessions, classes had to be moved into a remote delivery or online delivery from a face-to-face. That's a lot of work. It required a lot of our faculty to redo their syllabi, to understand what they could and couldn't do in the remaining parts of the semester that they had planned to do with their students. And for the students to understand the difference in how they would be assessed and how they would be able to participate in the courses that they were in. So we prepared well over 1,000 faculty and staff instructional members to teach with this new technology like Zoom and other software. We were lucky that we had the spring break week when students were gone, and we could prepare, again, over 1,000 faculty members and staff members during that week to modify their courses as needed and to be prepared to know how to use Zoom, to know how to coordinate a class discussion in a class from 19 to 200. So it's been a very daunting but surprisingly successful move on the part of all these many faculty and instructional staff helping our students do well. Literally tens and tens of thousands of Zoom meetings have occurred for classes. Our advisors are using it to help our students figure out what they need to do. And our tutors are as well, working individually and in small groups with students. And many, many other meetings are happening this way. Nearly 11,000 of our students chose to take a course. Most only took one, some took more than one, as a pass-fail class this spring. we put together a list of classes that were eligible to be taken as pass-fail rather than with a letter grade, knowing that the increased pressure and the change in mode of delivery was going to be more difficult than for some students more than others. And we had 11,000 students who have elected to take those courses that they could take that way. We have many, many other courses that are not eligible for whatever set of reasons. They are prerequisites that have to be met at a certain grade level to move on, or they're required by the disciplinary accreditations that we must meet to continue to offer those degrees. But it's worked out very well, and I think it was a big relief for a lot of our students. We have purchased nearly 700 laptops and webcams to ship out to students who needed them, who didn't have the correct equipment to be able to participate fully. Many students may have had a laptop or an iPad, but they didn't have webcams that were necessary to do some of the work in the class and also some of the testing that we are doing clearly via the internet. So we were happy to be able to help those students. We'll continue to do that as we move through our new students coming on board this summer, as well as in the fall, of course. And I'm really proud of our Office of Financial Aid. They have worked with the Office of Student Affairs, with the FSU Foundation to help distribute hundreds of hardship grants to students with financial need. And of course, we'll have many more of those to come. And the new CARES money from the federal government will make a difference in how we are processing those claims. But many of our students have real financial need that's been exacerbated certainly by the pandemic. So it hasn't been perfect, but we've really done our best to continue to give a preeminent education to our students and many opportunities for them to succeed. And I want to thank every member of this university community for that. Everybody I know has stepped up so much, and with very little complaining too, which is a surprise and a wonderful surprise. They're very happy to be able to do what they do. And as I said earlier, everyone is really committed to our students, which is the greatest thing about FSU. And that certainly continues. So I want to thank all my wonderful colleagues for not forgetting what FSU is all about. For the Academic Affairs Committee, we have a couple of items that I need you to vote on as a committee of the whole, as Chair mentioned. The first item, action item, is the approval of the accountability plan. You remember that we do this every year, and it was included in the agenda packet that you got for today. The format will look familiar to all of you who've been on the board for a while. If anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to ask me. It's a report we produce for the Board of Governors every year. It provides historical data on the BOG metrics that we are measured upon and projects our expectations for performance and goals for the future years. There aren't that many changes in our accountability plan from last year to this year. The main strategic initiatives of the university outlined in the plan are essentially the same, and we really don't believe that we need to change those essential initiatives and the strategic planning behind them at this point. However, since we met our goal of becoming a top 25 national university by busting through and become number 18, we did increase our US News ranking goal in the accountability plan. As we articulated in our budget, legislative budget request for the session, we're aiming to move into the top 15 in the short term and into the top 10 in the long term. We don't know what impact the pandemic will have on those goals, or even on how US News and World Report ranks universities and colleges this year, but so far we're planning to move ahead as planned. And a few other highlights from the plan you may have noticed. Overall, our metrics continue to be quite positive. Our trend for performance funding metrics is strong as always. And again, we'll meet all 12 of 12 of the state metrics for preeminence. Proud to be able to do that. One new metric that the BOG is tracking this year is the 3-year graduation rate of our transfer students, which is on page 13 in your report. This is 3 years after they join us. We're at a graduation rate of 73%, which is actually the highest in the state for transfer students. At 2 years after they join us, our rate is about 54%, which doesn't sound very good, but it is many, 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 many points ahead of anybody else in the university system. So we believe that we are, like with our freshmen and all our other students who join us, that we are working hard to help our transfer students succeed. And we will continue to focus on that and improve what we're able to do to help our our transfer students continue to succeed at even higher levels. Also on page 13, you'll see a metric for our average time to degree for undergrads. This is the average time it takes our students to graduate, of course. This metric has also improved, you'll see, and it is now down to 3.9 years. Many undergraduates in our traditional 120 credit hour programs are now graduating in under 4 years. And that number continues to grow as well, as many students take dual enrollment courses or IB or AP courses in high school and transfer in credits, and are just particularly well prepared as students to succeed here at Florida State. And finally, Gary will talk about this. Our total research expenditures for 2018-2019 also hit a record high of $329 million, as you see there. Of course, we don't know, again, what the pandemic will do to our metrics and rankings, and whether or not those evaluation systems themselves will change in response to these circumstances that everybody in the country finds themselves facing. These projections for the BOG were done prior to the pandemic, and given all the unknowns, we haven't made significant changes to the report. And this is consistent with the approach taken by other institutions in the SUS and with advice given to us by the BOG leadership. We did, however, adjust our enrollment, I should say our endowment metric on page 12, as the effects of the pandemic on the market have been significant, as you know, and the reporting year is almost over. We don't plan to make any other situational changes in this report, but of course we will be doing further forecasting for our own operations and as the situation evolves. Any questions on our accountability report?
Thank you, Sally. Sally, I think from my understanding with our Board of Governors conversation, we really just need to take action on the current results and not take action or do any formal Board of Trustees approval or even transmit the 3-year projections for them. They're just going to only focus on the actual results, the current results. They know that the 3-year projections are not meaningful until we live a little bit more through this pandemic time. So is the action item we need today is just going to be to approve the accountability plan as it's limited to its reporting the actual results as of the current year. Is that what you're asking us to do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then, having said that, is there a motion to approve the accountability item action plan, the accountability plan based on the actual results for the current year?
So moved, Henderson.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second was June, I think. All right, we have a motion and a second. So let's open it up for any questions or discussion. Seeing none, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
You have other items as well? You're
Yes,
right.
sir. Our next item is athletic coaching proposal to explore. Those of you who've served on the Academic Affairs Committee remember that the first part of getting a degree proposal approved is doing the proposal to explore part, and that's what we're asking for your approval for today. This is a master's degree in athletic coaching. It's the initial part, as I said, of the phase of degree approval process. It's being developed to fill an educational gap among coaches and prospective coaches. And as it turns out, only 10% of coaches today have formal training to be a coach. Coaching as a profession has become much more complex. Coaches of children's and adult sports must be prepared to deal with all kinds of issues, medical issues such as concussion and other injury prevention, optimal nutrition and physical development and performance, safety from sexual exploitation, and many other legal issues. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, coaching opportunities are projected to grow faster than average at over 10% over the course of the next few years. Now, those predictions may change based on the pandemic, but we don't know that at this point. The degree will be offered online by the College of Education. To serve, I don't know what that was. To serve current teachers and coaches, as well as potential coaches, again, in the College of Education. And since the degree will be in education, it will be classified in a Board of Governors strategic emphasis area, which certainly helps us with our metrics with the Board of Governors. Any questions?
Any questions for Sally? All right, we have a motion to approve the MS in athletic coaching. Is there a motion?
So moved, Jim Henderson.
Henderson, is there a second?
Second, John Thiel.
Is there a second?
Second, John Thiel.
John Thiel seconds. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you, sir. The final approval point is the termination of the cyber criminology master's program. This might seem like something we wouldn't want to do, but it actually is, we think, the right move. In the fall of 2019, the BOG conducted their regular review of all degree programs in the system, comparing the number of degrees granted to the minimum thresholds that they have set for what degrees must reach. This degree came up short at the master's level, having produced only 9 of the 20 required graduates in the past 5 years. After analyzing the data and the reasons for the shortfall, which include competition from their own more attractive master's degree programs, the Department of Computer Science and the College of Arts and Sciences, where this degree is housed, they determined that the best course of action was to request termination of this master's degree. A new master's level major within the computer science degree is being developed for future students who desire to integrate criminology coursework with their computer science curriculum. So it will be a major rather than a standalone degree. And the bachelor's level of this degree that we're talking about does meet the BOG's enrollment thresholds and will continue to be offered. There is currently 1 student enrolled in the master's program. All of the courses needed to complete the degree before its termination in spring of 2021 are available to that student who should be able to finish the degree and graduate. No faculty will be affected by this degree termination. They continue to teach in the Department of Computer Science's other programs. Any questions?
Thank you, Sally. Any questions for Sally? Sally, I remember when we launched this degree to really great fanfare.
Yeah.
We thought this would be sort of the nexus of criminology and computer science, which seems to be the wave of the future. Is it just the criminology masters overwhelmed? It's
I
so
think-
good in and of itself, we didn't need to add this.
Yes, sir. I think it was a combination of both things. And the other computer science master's programs became so lucrative in terms of being able to find really good jobs when students graduated that I think they tended to go more toward those. So we think this new major will help solve the problem of not finding the students we wanted for what we thought was initially a very important way to go.
All right, well, thank you. We have a request to terminate the cyber criminology master's degree. Is there a motion?
So moved. Again, Tim Henderson.
Trustee Henderson, is there a second?
Max seconds the motion.
Max Alvarez, seconded by Max. Any discussion?
I think, this is Jim Henderson. I would say for a company that's hired one of these, look at a cyber expert within the company, it's interesting that the background and criteria was a lot more of a generalist with respect to computer science than necessarily maybe the attributes with respect to criminology. So really, I guess I'm not surprised that this need is really being fulfilled really by the School of Computer Science.
Well, and I think it's also good that we have, we're reviewing these and making sure we're taking action on them where it's appropriate. So I think it's good.
Absolutely.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Sally, you have another information item for us on the abroad?
I do. Thank you. As the president mentioned, we rather quickly tried to bring home all our students studying at our international programs sites and make sure that they are all safe and healthy. So what I'm going to present right now is simply an information item. Because we've closed all our study centers around the world, the students who have been in our first year abroad program, which has been a very successful program where students start at one of these centers and then come to Tallahassee after they complete that first year abroad. And then after they have earned at least 37 credit hours in that first year abroad program, they then earn a waiver for out-of-state tuition. So they can be from any other state, do this 37 hours, and then come in and get in-state tuition here at Florida State University. We've actually found some of these students are extremely high quality students who are doing very well and helping our metrics in terms of retention and graduation. So we want to continue to support them. This year, we're going to have to offer the students opportunities to complete their courses online this spring. We're doing that now with the students who are in these programs and all the IP programs, and also in the summer. And we are still planning on granting them a waiver of out-of-state tuition. So we're hopeful that students in next year's first year abroad program will be able to start at one of the study abroad centers in the fall, perhaps, or if not, in the spring. But we want to plan in case that they can't. And so we will make similar accommodations for students in the program next year, should that become necessary. It's just an update on what we're trying to do to help these students. Any questions?
Thank you, Provost. Any questions for Provost McCrory? Well, we'll move to Student Affairs.
Excuse me, sir. May I add, as the president mentioned, we did announce that our summer C, our final summer session, will in fact be remote this summer. And because that's the session when many of our first time in college students and many of our transfer students join us, we're paying particular attention to working together all across the university to make sure that that their introduction to what it is to be a Florida State University student is positive and challenging with great opportunities as possible. And I really appreciate everybody also putting up many courses that are needed for incoming freshmen online in our summer session. Our faculty and deans have worked really hard to make sure that we have the appropriate courses needed for these groups of students who are joining us in summer C. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Sally, could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So they do their orientation online. If they've got a date to do it, is that when they do it?
Yes.
They're in phase with, I guess, a counselor.
Yes, ma'am. Amy Hecht will tell you about that. She and her team are organizing those orientations.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And I think next we'll have Dr. Heck with Vice President Student Affairs, and Amy, we'd love to hear from you. I think that is one of the questions that I think everyone has, is how are we going to handle the orientation for the new students, and then how we're going to handle our training. I mean, sort of our alcohol and training that we've been so focused on the last several years. John Thiel chairs that. John, I don't know if you have anything to say before we go to Amy.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that they're working very hard virtually, specifically on health and wellness, which you can imagine comes front and center with all the change and all the fears that we all have, but especially someone who had to go home and face all of that. But also individually, they're working with those who have concerns around the virus or the many vast and varied challenges that these kids undoubtedly have as a result of all this. And I wanted to just share one personal anecdote. I have a son who's earning his online master's degree in May. I have a daughter who's completing her degree online, and both had been doing that. And when you especially look at the excellence of the master's online degrees, and this to you, Sally, and to Amy and the whole faculty, you realize that all the time we've spent on that actually prepared us for this switch to a virtual reality. And it reminds us that we're going to come out of this with different ways of operating. And as we think about innovation and trying new things, I think our online programs prepared us for this that no one could anticipate. So I really just want to congratulate the team for their willingness to embrace innovation and challenge us all. Next time something that didn't look like what we experienced comes up, that we embrace it instead of try to stop it from happening. So with that,
thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know many of you received my PowerPoint presentation in advance, and I want to first thank the team in the Division of Student Affairs. Like the rest of the institution, my team has turned on a dime and been completely innovative, student-centered. And when you think about the FSU student experience, pre-COVID-19, I think it was hard to imagine what an FSU experience would look like virtually. And what I'm going to share with you, I think we're really proud of. I also know that our students and across the nation are facing uncertainty, anxiety like the rest of us, as well as loneliness in some cases. And for others, just a sense that they're not moving forward in their life and plans are on hold. And the uncertainty has really led to interesting and new challenges in terms of mental health and how we support our students. So I do want to talk a lot about holistically what we're doing. In our housing operation, we have closed our residence halls to students who have left Tallahassee for spring break. But we do remain open for roughly 130 students. We did not want our students to not have a place to go. We know that for some, they are safer and better off in Tallahassee in our residence halls. We did issue refunds for those students who are no longer living with us on campus, and have coordinated move out to stay as safe as possible. And our students have two options. Right now, when the stay-at-home order is lifted, thanks to Kyle and his team, we have partnered with UPS, and our students will contract, if they wish, option one, to have UPS pack and store their residence hall room, or pack and ship, or pack, store / ship for them if they would like to do a combination. UPS will store items in a climate controlled space and deliver them to their Tallahassee residents in the fall. It's a really great deal. We are issuing a $100 voucher. It costs $400, but with the $100 voucher, it would cost $300 for students to do this. And for our students who live out of state, New Jersey, New York, or in South Florida, it might be a more cost-effective method and allow them to get their things perhaps sooner. Option 2 will be to allow students to come back when deemed safe by the state, and we will phase them in to abide by any social distancing or crowd size and allow them to physically move themselves out themselves. So those options will start once it is safe to do so. But once we do have cleared out our apartments, we will be consolidating all of our students that have opted to stay with us throughout the summer. And only those students who have stayed with us will be able to stay, but we will move them into apartments so that they'll have better access to a kitchen. In terms of our health services, we have moved to a telehealth model for many. So since this started March 23rd, we have had 631 appointments. 419 of those have been telehealth, telemedicine. So many of our nurses and doctors are able to work from home and treat patients, but we do have staff in our health service center serving students as well. So 84% of our appointments are now virtual. We do conduct COVID-19 tests, whether that means collecting the specimen ourselves or sending students to the testing center in Tallahassee. We have conducted 40 tests, and only one of those tests came back positive, and that has been reported in the media. Our health advocacy and wellness program have conducted a number of virtual events. We have 15 educational videos. 64 students have received direct one-on-one virtual service, whether that is a nutrition process or alcohol education process. And we've reached over 80,000 people through social media in terms of our health and wellness. As you can imagine, counseling and psychological services remains busy. Since March 23rd, we have had 840 unique counseling sessions, and those are conducted often through Zoom on a HIPAA compliant process. We've had over 1,000 kind of walk-in, if you will, individual and group sessions. Virtually, of course. 12 students have received crisis interventions. They have been in crisis and we were able to respond. We've had 18 calls to our after hours crisis service. And if you remember, we have a 24/7 number to serve students, and we continue to do that. And so we've also done 49 online and virtual psychoeducational programs, which are part of our preventative effort to over 100 students. And anecdotally, what we're hearing from students, those that were already clients of the counseling center, knew at the start of this that they must continue their treatment and did not shy away from the virtual nature of what needed to happen. They have, in some cases, returning to home has been a great protective factor, and that has helped them. And for others, it has been an additional stressor to be in their home environment. And as you can imagine, in some cases, difficulty to have privacy and have a confidential conversation, but they have worked through those challenges. And as you can imagine, we've seen new clients who had some pre-existing issues that this exacerbated and led them to seek help. And I think the important piece is here that the stigma has really been reduced and students are seeking help. In particular, they're still seeking help even virtually in this time. And so I'm really proud of our team in health services and counseling services for continuing to serve students. Case management, as you can imagine, have been very busy. We have distributed 43 loaner laptops and 11 webcams to students through the university's technology loaner program. And our food pantry has had 176 unique visits. We've put in some procedures to make sure we're being as safe as possible in terms of when people can drop off donations. We're encouraging Amazon wish list donations, and students must make appointments to receive their food. And we continue to have great participation by our alum and friends of FSU to keep giving to the food pantry. And I know our students appreciate that immensely. Many of you have given to the Seminole Relief Fund. Thank you. It has not been in vain. We have distributed over $330,000 to students. Every day we receive about 80 to 100 applications still to this day of students who need assistance, whether it's with childcare, food, housing, and so on. We've received over 1,300 applications. We've awarded 556 students. And each average award had been around $609. And so that money has really helped. And we continue to anticipate a need throughout the summer and possibly the fall as the economic ramifications of COVID-19 continue.
Amy, let me interrupt you on that.
Sure.
The students who apply and don't get the awards, what are the qualifying factors or the disqualifying factors in those cases?
Well, we make sure we ask our students, and sometimes we go back and forth with them. Many have lost their jobs, whether it's been waiting tables or another method, they've lost their positions, and so that they can no longer purchase their groceries. They may not be able to pay certain bills. They may need help traveling home, and we help them with all of those pieces. So it really needs to fall into a category that the issue that they cannot pay for or they don't have access to is related in some way to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we ask for as much verification as we can get, knowing that they often don't get a letter from a restaurant that their hours have been cut. And so we do the best we can. For some students, they had unexpected bills because of COVID. Maybe they had to go home, stay home, change a flight, or buy a bus ticket. And so we work to reimburse them there. So that's been a lot of what we've helped students with. We do not give money for tuition. And we work closely with financial aid to make sure that their overall financial package remains within federal guidelines.
All right, well, thank you. And what's the easy, I know this will continue to, these needs will increase. What's the easiest way, since we have a large audience, for people to contribute?
The easiest way is to go online to the FSU fundraising, the FSU development site, and give. It's been a focus of Tom Jennings' area, which I appreciate so much. And it's been a focus of the whole institution to really build this up, because this is what we hope is going to keep our students engaged at FSU and retained, and hopefully remove one barrier during this uncertain time to their continued progress towards graduation.
All right, I'm sure Tom will share the exact link for us.
Yes, I'm sure he will.
Thank you.
I know it was a focus of our great give. Yes.
Are none of these students receiving the checks for being laid off?
That I don't know. I think Kyle will be sharing information on the federal $1,200 checks that students receive, but also the CARE Act, of what that means and how exactly we may be distributing that money to students and how it could overlap with this effort. But unfortunately, that CARE Act is going to fall short based on our estimates of what FSU will need and what our students are going to need. Another piece, and I, unless there are any more questions on so far, one piece that I'm really proud of that we created is Virtual FSU. And if you Google Virtual FSU, you'll find that we have moved everything that FSU has that makes it special to a virtual location. So everything from our fitness classes to student meetings to educational programs are available to our students online. It's actually really incredible when I think of all the work that has been done. Myrna Hoover and her team in the Career Center have also pivoted on a dime and moved even more so online. Everything from jobs and employment after graduation. We still have companies, thankfully, interviewing and hiring our graduates, and they're conducting practice Skype interviews and other to really prep our students for what a virtual career search looks like. A really important role that I want to point out that they have done is we have many students that must have an internship to graduate, whether they're education majors or others. And they worked really hard with each of the deans and the faculty to create as many virtual internships that will be appropriate and rigorous enough that will allow them to keep progressing to graduation. And so that's been really important to keep our students moving forward. As I mentioned, Campus Recreation has a full schedule of both live group fitness classes for our students and other ways to get them moving, keep them engaged, help keep them healthy during this time, and maybe get them up from the computer after a full day of Zooming for class. And in fraternity and sorority life, Vanderbilt actually called Chris Graham, our director, and said, may we use some of your material? And if you look at their website, it actually looks exactly like our website. So we really have become the benchmark for virtual engagement. So we are helping all of our students engage their chapters virtually through Zoom, ways in which to do risk management education, and so on, and really keep our community engaged and benefiting. And different national organizations also have some tools to give their chapters, but not all do. So we've really been proactive in making sure our chapter leadership are engaged and still connecting with their sorority members and fraternity members. Most of our fraternities and sorority houses are closed. Some have apartments, and we do have individuals still living in those portions, particularly of the fraternity houses, but the big congregating spaces have been closed, and we've been working really closely with them so that they can mirror what we're doing in our Residence Life program to help keep those students safe. And I know that's been really important aspect. We have started to think and try to be proactive of what a fall recruitment could look like, whether there are social distancing requirements and so on, but really that's an unknown right now, but we are just trying to be ahead of any possible scenario so we make sure that we keep our Greek community healthy and thriving. In terms of orientation, we have moved all of our orientation to online. So for every student that is new to Florida State, they will have an online virtual experience. It will be something where they can start and stop and really engage, and they will be learning both all of the resources they access virtually, especially for those students in Summer C, which we know is fully online, but also what to expect when they come onto campus in the fall and what that means to physically be at FSU. And so we are also gearing up for a welcome week and some extra experiences to really help engage those students physically once they're here and once they're safe. Students are going to connect virtually with their orientation leaders. They'll still feel connected to a student peer educator, to their advisor as they select courses, and they'll be completing a lot of online content in terms of Title IX education, and sexual assault prevention, alcohol, EDU, and so on, so that we're working as best we can to get them ready to be successful at Florida State. We do feel confident that this next generation that's coming to Florida State will be ready. They are, in particular, our Summer C students that are first time in college will have wrapped up their high school senior year online, and we hope it will be a smooth transition for them. We've been working with our care students that traditionally do a summer bridge to create really meaningful virtual connections for them, and making sure they have a one-on-one virtual connection with faculty and our staff to help them be successful. As you think through a virtual FSU, what other questions can I answer that I haven't, or what could I go more in depth on?
Any questions for Dr. Heck?
You were saying the care would be one-on-one virtual. The other students that are not in the care program will not be?
They will be through their advisor. They'll receive some one-on-one with their orientation leader, but care also does some additional programming throughout the summer as part of the bridge program. And since that won't be in person, that one-on-one attention will also be virtual.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Dr. Heck? Amy, you've
Thank
had
you,
your
Amy.
shares. Go ahead. Who?
No, it's Brent. I'm just thanking Amy. I'm sure it's a stressful time for her too.
Yeah, I echo that, Amy. You've had your share of challenges at FSU, and a lot of them on campus and some in your personal life, and you have just responded admirably, and managing this process and helping our students through this process has been nothing short of remarkable. And thank you for the great job you've done. And,
well, thank you. I have a great team and great colleagues I work with.
And, we will move on then, if we can, and we'll go to Finance and Business. Bob Sasser chairs that committee, and Kyle Clark is our VP for Finance Administration. Bob, you want to introduce that?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Burr. And good morning to the trustees. Can everyone hear me? Still getting used to the mute button here.
We have you.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, good. As you know, the staff has worked extremely hard over the past few months to ensure the safety and the well-being of all of our students and the faculty and the staff. I am particularly appreciative of the continuous updates and communications they've provided. And I just want to share that I have great admiration, and I want to say thank you for all the good work there. Over the past several weeks, I have asked for and worked with Kyle and the staff to develop some economic impacts and sensitivity analysis associated with the impact of the coronavirus. I think as fiduciaries, it's important to review these scenarios. That said, it's also important to note that these are all estimates. They're based on hypothetical scenarios. The team has tried to use data wherever possible, but sometimes all we have to go on is our gut instinct. Although this is an unfortunate and evolving situation to work through, I am pleased with the efforts of the team and the initiatives that they have implemented to best position the university to come out of the crisis. Many of these will be discussed by Kyle momentarily. But before we do that, I think it's also important to note that while the safety and security of the campus and community is of the utmost importance, the administration has done a terrific job while also maintaining continuity of instruction, learning, and operations. I know they are eager to open and resume normal operations as soon as it is safe to do so. And we're all hoping that this is fall, but we will take it a day at a time. Florida State University will work its way through this. We are currently well positioned. We have a strong credit rating. I think you all remember we were upgraded last year by both Fitch and Standard & Poor's. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Kyle to discuss these scenarios. Kyle?
Thank you, Chairman Sasser. So thank you all to all the board members for participating in today's call. In just a second, I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that I can walk through the PowerPoint slides that we have shared with you all. For those members of the media that are on the call, if they want to touch base with Browning Brooks after the call, she would be happy to share the slides with you that we're going to talk about in today's call. I want to start just like my colleagues did and thank my team. They have responded through every twist and turn. We're handling the daily operations of the university. We're still making sure that people get paid. We're still paying bills. We're onboarding some folks, delaying recruitment of other positions, but they're having to do their daytime job while also managing all the new guidance that we're getting from the federal government, the state government, and other folks. And it's been a considerable extra workload. So I want to thank them for all of their hard work and help. And now I will see if I can. Can all of you hopefully see? Yes. You can see my screen. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right. So as we start this, I want to echo what Chairman Sasser said. These scenarios are hypothetical. They are some scenarios we have data around and that we've been able to have some really good estimates under. Other scenarios are just gut instincts. As the president mentioned, there's a lot that's unknown and uncertain right now. And so just keep that in mind as we work through and we discuss a number of these scenarios. I thought it was best to maybe start with a reminder of where we are on our 2020 operating budget. So when you look at this, try to move this over. You can see our 2019-2020 operating budget, and you'll see that we have education general funds, state support of $568 million. Those are funds that are appropriated directly from the legislature to Florida State University. Those are predominantly from general revenue and lottery funds that the state collects. The education general tuition and fees, those are things that our students pay in directly to Florida State University, and that totals around $213.6 million. Our designated funds are local funds that are collected at the university, and those are predominantly student fee monies like distance learning, the financial aid fee, technology fee, vending money, those sorts of things, and those account to about $72 million. Our auxiliary funds, which are predominantly sales and service, are things like athletics, housing, food service, and those sorts of things. Our debt service is around $24 million. That is predominantly for the wellness center, for our parking garages, and for housing. We have about $443 million worth of restricted funds. Those are funds that are restricted by an external entity. They may be through private giving through the FSU Foundation. They could be research funds that Gary and faculty members have gone out and got from agencies, or there could be some instructional funds that are restricted in there. The big thing being that they're restricted by an external group for one particular purpose. We estimated that we would spend around $239 million on capital projects. We'll talk about those as we progress too. And then last but not least, we have our component units, which are mainly our direct support organizations, and the medical practice income plan, which is around $94.5 million. If you flip to the next slide, you'll see just in a pie chart how these break out. And again, state support being our largest share of the pie at almost 30%, followed by the restricted piece that's 23%, our auxiliaries at 13%, and tuition and fees at 11.2% in terms of our overall budget. The next slide shows you our component units, and you'll see the largest component unit of the university is Seminole Boosters at almost $49 million. We have international programs at around $18.8 million. Financial Assistance Inc., which is almost $16 million, is the conduit that the boosters use to issue debt, followed by the FSU Foundation, that's almost $11 million. Now, you'll remember that last year, part of the foundation's budget has been moved over to the university for the spendable accounts and some of their staff salaries. So now we'll talk about the potential impacts of COVID-19. I'm not going to go through all of the information and all the initiatives that we've done related to COVID-19. I think you all are well aware of all the steps that we've had to take and the guidance that we've had to give to the community. For those of you that aren't in Leon County has extended their curfew from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., and that is still in place. Our hospital and one of the hospitals in town, Tallahassee Memorial, has sent out a letter to the community encouraging to slow the spread and asking people to stay home at this time unless there's some kind of essential activity that they have to take part of. Emergency management has been working with us for an extended period of time now, assisting with the day-to-day COVID crisis, also helping with recovery plans. We're collaborating with folks about alternative care and testing sites. We're also focused on the hurricane season. We're following the news around that and working with the National Weather Service already, and then of course COVID-19. In terms of health and medical, our wellness center is still open for students. Patients are provided masks. 85% of the cases right now are being seen via telehealth, as Amy mentioned. The test results take about 5 days if they have to go in and be tested for COVID. They've had no flu cases in 4 weeks. They've had 40 students, as Amy mentioned, that have been tested for COVID, and one of those cases was positive. We are providing daily updates regarding health, safety, and operations of our community. We've tried to bundle those up into as few of announcements as possible so that we don't overwhelm the campus community. You heard the president and Chairman Sasser and me mention this before. All of this information that is going to be provided related to the impacts of this financially is all speculation and estimates. This changes minute to minute, hour by hour, and so this information was produced. It was with the best information that we had at the time. There's much uncertainty surrounding our budget at the current time, and we continue to encourage all of campus to be prudent and fiscally responsible. And we'll talk about some of the steps that we have taken in that regard. So the first thing to talk about are fiscal impact estimates related to state appropriations and for the general revenue and lottery. So what we wanted to do was to provide to you all what a potential reduction could potentially look like in terms of dollar amounts and percentages if the legislature were to take such action. Remember, the general revenue and lottery state appropriations funds are funds that are appropriated directly by the legislature. So if the legislature were to reduce our appropriations by 10% for most of campus, that would be around a $43.8 million reduction. You can see on the slides what a 15% reduction could look like and a 20% reduction as well. The College of Medicine and the College of Engineering are separated out separately. The reason for that is they have separate appropriations that are different than the university. We are the fiscal agent for the College of Engineering, and it has a separate appropriation than that of the university. A 10% reduction at the College of Medicine would be $3.6 million. A 10% reduction at the College of Engineering would be about $1.4 million. If you add up the total reduction for appropriations for the FSU main campus, medicine and engineering, that would be close to $49 million on a 10% reduction. And again, this is just looking at the state appropriations piece that makes up a significant portion of our operating budget.
Here we go.
The next slide it really focuses on tuition revenue. And so, as you know, on the tuition piece, we get to keep the revenue that we collect based off of our enrollment. And so we've tried to provide you all with what a 5 and 10 and 20% reduction might look like for the summer and for the fall and spring. I think the president mentioned we feel good right now about our summer school and fall enrollment. We are working on that. It's too early to predict right now what those enrollments might look like. So these are just hypothetical scenarios that we wanted to share with the Board of Trustees. I think, we've mentioned that most of the students who enroll in the summer enroll in Summer C. That's around June 21st is the start date for Summer C. So it likely will be mid-July after the add drop period and after the dust settles before we are able to give a really great number as it turns out for summer school. But you can see a 5% reduction in summer school would be around a $2 million reduction. You can see what a 5% reduction in fees would look like, and that'd be about 2.2 million. And then the College of Medicine has block tuition, and so you'd see what a 5% reduction would look like for them as it relates to tuition and revenue, tuition and fees as well. We've provided you what the same information would be like for fall and spring. Again, way too early to predict what may happen with the fall and spring, but we wanted to provide it just so that you could see what that number potentially looks like. The next slide, on slide 11, is really a summary of what our general revenue, lottery funds, and in total, really E&G looks like. So this is when you combine our appropriation that we receive from the state and the tuition and fee budget that we collect locally. So you take the general revenue appropriation line, you take the potential drop in tuition line along with the fee line, and that brings you to what a 5% reduction in our appropriation would look like, along with the 5% reduction in tuition would look like, and a fee reduction as well. And that would be around $48 million for the summer, fall, and spring if we had a 5% reduction in enrollment and in our appropriation. You can see the same information that we're providing for 10% and 20%. And again, all of this is based on our current year operating budget. So now we can get into some information that there's a little bit more certainty around in some areas. So the next few sections, really, I want to focus in on what we know to some degree as it relates to economic impacts in some of our auxiliary areas and what we know about for between now and August. So you all have heard us mentioned, and I know we've notified you a couple of times, that we did provide housing refunds for the students who are no longer living in our residence halls. That accounted for around $6.6 million. There's still some refunds that housing is working on, but the vast majority of those have been complete. You can see that us not having students living in our residence hall this semester is around a $4.2 million hit to their revenue budget as well. In terms of the fall and spring, we basically took a 5% reduction in enrollment and showed you what that would look like on an annual basis for housing if we had a 5% reduction in enrollment, or what that would do to their budget. We've also refunded already the $3.7 million that you see shown there for meal plans. So students received those refunds back on April 8th if they had a meal plan. And you can see what not having meal plans on campus in terms of the loss of sales is around $2.6 million for the summer. We've projected fall and spring with a 5% enrollment. Again, too early to say what that may be for fall and spring, if any. And then I think it's important to note that I know Sam McCall is probably on the line, but Sam did look at the methodology for the way that these refunds were issued for housing and for meal plans, and was able to verify, with one exception. I think there was a tweak that needed to be made in one residence hall, but that the information and the credits that we provided were accurate. So we did have Sam and his team look at that. We're going to talk about other auxiliary lost sales and service on the next slide and go into detail on that. But for the spring, we could have as much as a $7 million hit for some of our auxiliaries. In the summer, it could be around 8 million. And then for the fall and spring, as much as 36.5 million. Other expenses, international programs. I think you all know we operate international campuses in Panama, London, in Spain, and in Italy. All of those programs have closed and have moved all of their academic learning to online, and a significant portion of those expenses have been refunded to the students. So for the spring semester, there were about $1 million worth of refunds. We also provided some funding for airline tickets to assist the students returning home as well on top of this $1 million. We're projecting around a $14 million loss in revenue for the summer. None of those programs are open in foreign countries for the summer. They are offering program online for students so that students can still take advantage of some courses. And then if they're not able to open for the fall and spring, you can see that $20 million revenue loss as well. In terms of the University Foundation and research, both of those numbers are provided there for you in terms of what a potential loss could look like if we're not able to conduct research, if our giving were to go down, or our investment returns were to go down as well. We predicted general expense increases related to cleaning and related to expenses related to online learning for additional computer and software equipment and those sorts of things. The last thing shown on the slide is the requirement to pay for the expanded paid sick and family leave. This is the new federal leave that came out on April 1st. HR has done a wonderful job in communicating all of those options to the campus community. That is an estimate of what those expenses could look like. The next slide, on slide 13, shows a detail of auxiliary lost sales and revenue. You can see we have 17 different auxiliary groups here, and we've tried to estimate what a potential dip in their revenue may look like. Again, I would say that this is more of an art than a science. We've used gut instincts on many of these to come up with these estimates after looking at their budget and knowing about the situation that we know at this point in time. The next slide shows what the potential impact of the coronavirus could be through August of 2020. We know we've already issued the $6.6 million worth of housing refunds. We know that housing is going to have a $4.2 million loss this summer. We know that meal plans have already been refunded for the spring at $3.7 million. We know that they're going to lose around $2.6 million in sales. In terms of other auxiliary lost sales and service and revenue, we are projecting maybe around $15.1 million in a loss in revenue and sales in those areas. In terms of other expenses and lost revenue from research, investment earnings, private giving, cleaning expenses, that sort of thing, we're projecting around $15.5 million in additional loss of revenue or expenses for through August of 2020. International programs has about a $15 million revenue loss for not being able to complete the spring semester or offer summer programming. And then I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the Families First Coronavirus First Response Act employer paid leave. That's the new leave that was available to folks on April 1st. We're anticipating around $11 million in potential costs for that. Again, these are all hypothetical scenarios. When you add that up, that comes to around a $73.7 million impact in terms of our overall budget. So I want to talk for a minute around the federal CARES funding that has been allocated to us. Those allocations.
Kyle, this is good.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
just pause a minute. That was a lot of information.
God, yes, it was.
And see if there's any questions or thoughts or comments. I guess the final tally of the $77 million, that's only through August. So, that doesn't start to take into impact of what impairment we may have starting in the fall. So, and I think it's well presented and clear, but let's just, see if anyone has any questions or comments about it.
Yeah, this is Brent. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, let's see if I got my camera on. Yeah, I guess, Kyle, you've talked about loss of revenue. Have you looked at potential savings? I mean, there's got to be savings when there's nobody on campus, and and other opportunities maybe is question one. And then question two really is, at some point we need to, and we're all asking the questions, about fall and what that looks like as far as the next line item on your report. So I get that we're, looking up to and kind of assuming we're going to have a fall, and we'll deal with that when we get there. But look, we're talking about looking out and planning, and that clearly is one of the things and Ed, I agree with you. That's one of the things we need to be looking at.
So as we progress through this presentation, I'm going to go over in more detail some of the actions that we've taken to address some of the offsets that we might expect related to revenue. So that's a great question, Trustee Simbler, in terms of what are we doing. So we have put in a hiring freeze. We were very early on in establishing a hiring freeze in March. So their positions have been frozen. And you have to apply for an exception to hire someone at this point in time. We eliminated travel very early on, so there will be savings related to that. We have adjusted our operations as it relates to the way that we maintain our buildings in terms of heating, cooling, and personnel as well. So there'll be savings related to that as well. We're working with, for example, on food service, we're working with our contractor, Sodexo, to help offset part of those losses as well related to food service. In terms of housing, what housing is doing is they are reducing the staff, of course, that they would have in the summer. They hire a significant number of part-time help and students in the summer. Obviously, with having very few students, they're not going to need the same level of staff. Housing is also delaying a lot of capital projects. And so I feel pretty confident in terms of the housing loss and their ability to reduce their expenses by almost the same amount, so that it will almost be a wash in terms of the expenses and the loss of revenue in housing. We also, on the university side, are not moving forward with a significant number of capital projects. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to show you those as we progress through. I think that's around $49 million that we are taking a temporary halt to. We have encouraged all of our departments to be frugal and to delay purchases and expenses whenever necessary. And we know that that's effective. We're seeing a decrease in the number of purchases that are coming through, and so we feel good about that. We've also talked with many of our colleagues in terms of reduction strategies and starting to think through what some of those reductions may look like. But as the president said, in terms of where we are right now, this is something that we're managing. This is something that we're working through. There's a lot of ambiguity. We agree we want to have robust plans in place. This is what financially it could look like through the summer, and we will adjust as needed based on what the outcomes of the legislature and how we enroll students over the summer.
Thank you, Kyle. Any other questions for Kyle? All right, let's go forward.
I really wanted to talk a little bit about the funding, the federal funding related to CARE. I know you all have heard about this. Trustee Sembler, this is another potential offset as well that we would be able to use to help with some of those expenses. So the first thing was to just talk about how the funds were allocated. So the federal government allocated the funds to institutions based on the number, 75% of it was based on the number of FTE Pell Grant recipients that institutions had. And then 25% of it was based on the share of FTEs who were not Pell Grant recipients. The next slide shows you our allocation, and it shows you our peer institutions in the state of Florida that are public. So we're anticipating receiving around $29 million in federal funding. We have not received any of those funds as of this moment. Half of those funds will be provided for student support, and half will be provided for institutional costs. Right now, we're working with the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, and the Florida Board of Governors to clarify the rules surrounding what we can spend these funds on. Student scholarships, those sorts of things for summer school and for other student aid opportunities. We do anticipate that $14.6 million number would be available in the coming weeks. As the president mentioned, those funds will be released first, followed by the second half of funds. We've been on a number of calls around this with peers in the state and with the U.S. Department of Education and with the Board of Governors. So we're monitoring this very closely, and I think the majority of the president's cabinet is in tune with this, and we're having discussions surrounding this. In terms of some of the other things that we have done, this goes to Trustee Sembler's question earlier. On March 11th, we created a human resources coronavirus task force to really deal with a lot of the questions that we're getting from the campus community and to provide guidance based on the changes with the federal government. On March 18th, we implemented the hiring freeze that went into effect immediately. On March 19th, we sent out communication to all of the financial representatives across campus and notified them that they need to reevaluate their existing requisitions and contracts. Requisition is another name for a purchase order on our campus. So really encouraging them to look at what they were anticipating spending money on and reevaluate that. We do have a significant number of expenses that occur in the summer. So we really ask people to change on a dime and to really delay spending those funds. On March 23rd, we began impact bargaining with our unions, as you heard the president mention. We are still in the process of working with the faculty union, the UFF, and we did reach agreement with the GAU, as they mentioned earlier on the call. On March 26th, we again notified departments to be prudent in their spending, and to also we encourage them to refrain from spending any of their carry forward funds, which are the one-time funds that departments have. On March 30th, we launched a remote and professional development training module so that staff and faculty still had opportunities to participate in those activities, and that's done internally through our human resources group. On April 3rd,
Kyle, this is President. Could I think you might want to explain what impact bargaining is as opposed to regular bargaining.
Sure.
Just a lot of members won't know that. So
impact bargaining really relates with, the situation that we have on hand and when our campus has been disrupted. there were a number of different initiatives that both of the unions brought forward that they wanted to reach agreement on about how the coronavirus has impacted their units. And that's something that we have been working with them on. On April 1st, we distributed essential employee guidance for restrictions to on-campus employees related to the governor's order, and that now we heavily encourage remote working, and only essential employees we encourage to be on campus and ask other folks to be off campus. And then on April 8th, we refunded the housing that you see, the $6.6 million, which went to over 6,100 students. And then on the dining side, we refunded $3.7 million, which was for 6,221 students. So in terms of cash management, we wanted to speak for just a minute related to cash management. The university normally maintains a small cash balance to cover expenses. We invest our excess funds. We have a very robust cash management system that our controllers group and Michael Williams help oversee. The excess funds are invested through the state of Florida's special purpose investment account. And we're allowed to liquidate up to $20 million per day, $20 to $75 million within 5 business days notice. And then anything greater than $75 million, they ask us to give them 20 business day. Of course, those are our guidelines. They're very good to work with, and we haven't had any problems in drawing down any of our funds. Since March, the university has maintained a rolling 1-month cash balance in our primary depository account. And as of April 30th, 2020, this year, the university's combined cash and investment position compared almost equally to that of a year ago. We were within $1 million. And keep in mind, that's after we did the refunds for housing and for food service, which, were around $10 million. We're scheduled to receive around $118.5 million in the current fiscal year appropriations over the next 3 months. So that's the normal schedule. We get a draw, I think, every 2 weeks or so. And so those we anticipate are going to continue. As we mentioned, our auxiliary funds decreased by 10%, which is mainly due to the refunds we've issued to students related to food service and to housing. We have seen increases in our designated area and our sponsored research funds. As I mentioned earlier, we're working with our food service provider to hopefully recover a portion of those dining refunds. That was around $3.7 million, and we're hopeful to recover as much of that as possible from food service. And then the CARES Act funding that we mentioned, that's $29 million, and about half of that will be able to go to offset any revenue losses, we hope, or expenses. I wanted to talk for just a minute around the 2021 operating budget. We start on our operating budget in January. This is a timeline of all the steps that we go through. We have asked campus to continue and move forward with the operating budget process. We know that there is uncertainty related to all of our fund groups, and we know that we will likely need to make adjustments to our operating budget. But in order to have the budget prepared and ready for you all to review at the June Board of Trustees meeting, it's imperative to have a sound process and to give people an opportunity to put together their operating budget. So that is moving forward, and we will make any adjustments that we need to, and we will work with campus on those adjustments. I know you all have been shared this information already. I'll just touch on it briefly. The president has already mentioned that the budget hasn't been signed by the governor. There's not been any vetoes related to it because he doesn't have it yet. We did receive $20 million for the College of Business. We did receive $15 million for national ranking enhancements. We received $5 million for the Florida Institute for Child Welfare. We received $1 million for the Institute on Politics. and there was almost $1 million provided for an increase in health insurance costs. I mentioned we've asked departments to continue entering in their operating budget into our budget system, which is Hyperion, and we anticipate bringing this to the Board of Trustees during the June meeting. So all of the funding that's on this page is provided in next year's operating budget, and we are in a wait and see mode in terms of the governor signing of the budget. I wanted to provide a chart that shows you the different steps that our capital projects have gone through. You'll see the very last column is the most important column, and it shows the final conference allocation for PICO projects, and you'll see the College of Business there receive the $20 million allocation. I mentioned facility updates. We don't have the chart that you all have become accustomed to seeing since last June, but I just wanted to touch base with you on the projects that have been completed, the projects that are moving forward at this time, and the projects that we are suspending until we have more of a clear picture related to our operating budget. These projects that are shown here are projects that have already been completed this fiscal year, which are things like the Earth, Ocean, Atmospheric Science Building, the golf course, the Technology Services Building, a number of dining improvements, the Rogers Building, Chieftain Way realignment, Central Plant improvements, and of course the Interdisciplinary Health Clinic. Projects that are under design and construction right now. These projects have been ongoing, most of them for many months, and so we're moving forward with them at this time. The Student Union, Bio Unit 1, Hoffman, STEAM, CAPS, Marine Lab, the Chemistry Re-Roof, Caraway, Strozier Library, the Love Building, the Slager Data Center, some exterior lighting upgrades, the DeGraff renovations, National High Magnetic Field Lab, the College of Engineering has a couple projects, the Ringling, and of course, the College of Business. In terms of projects that are on hold, you can see that the Interdisciplinary Research and Commercialization Building is on hold at the current time. Clayman Plaza is $2.2 million. The Collins Building renovation is $2 million. Dittmer Chemistry Lab is $7 million. Ringling has about a $1.5 million renovation. The Mag Lab network upgrade was around $1 million. Kellogg Building was around $7 million. A minor campus project that had been previously approved, those are around $25 million that we're going to delay. And then housing has several projects that they're delaying as well. You add those up and you get around $49.7 million worth of projects that are going to be on hold. That really completes what I had planned to share today. Again, the information that we are providing is all preliminary and speculative, but we wanted to be transparent with the board and talk about the potential financial impacts that we could face as a result of this, and let you all know that we have started making plans in terms of addressing some of the revenue and expense increases and shortfalls. And I know Chairman Sasser, I think you had some other things to add on before we wrap up.
Yeah, Kyle, I just want to say thank you to you and to the staff for this robust review. I think it's important to note that hopefully these are worst case scenarios, but while we have to think ahead and plan, we have to take a look at them. So, but there's no reason for panic or alarm. It's something that we can manage through. And of course, I encourage you, Kyle, to continue to plan and evaluate the situation. And please continue to keep the board updated whenever possible around important matters. We will know much more when the governor signs the budget and we have a more clear picture of our summer enrollments. Chairman Burr, I now turn it back to you.
Thank you, Trustee Sasser. Kyle, I don't know if there's a way to unshare your thing and we can bring everyone back. Kyle, I appreciate the sensitivity analysis at 5 and 10 and 20%. But I've got the budget process. I'd like to talk through the budget process. I think the president alluded earlier that the BOG and discussions with them is that we may not know until July about the fall semester. And yet we're trying to prepare a budget that would need this board's approval in June. And that's the normal course of business to transmit it to July for the BOG to get approval by September. Is there any flexibility, or have we talked to the BOG about, what basis we're using for that budget? 5, 10, 15, 20% drop in enrollment, or do we do it on the historical assumptions, and or sort of compressing the BOG's review timeframe so we can push our submittal back into July so we have a better picture of what the fall might look like?
All of those are great questions. So to answer the first one in terms of, did we do this in a silo? The answer is no. We worked with the Board of Governors staff, and they sort of were the ones that developed the 5, 10, 15, 20% scenarios in terms of trying to be consistent with all of our peers around the state, so that we performed this exercise in a similar manner across all of the state university system. In terms of what discretion do we have on our operating budget, the answer is, our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So we have, I think, a lot of discretion as it relates to when the board would meet, or maybe passing some type of continuation budget or something along those lines. We would have to defer to the Board of Governors about that. We have not had a conversation surrounding that. I'm happy to talk to the Board of Governors staff. I talk to them multiple times a day, and all the CFOs in the state get together every day. So I'm happy to have those discussions with them, and to put that on the radar in terms of additional adjustments may need to be made. As far as the normal rule of thumb, though, all institutions by BOG policy and regulation, I think, are required to produce and have a Board of Trustee approved operating budget by June 30th.
Right.
Mr. Chair, could I add something to that? The next BOG meeting after the May meeting is June 18th. And so, if we don't have a budget signed by the governor by then, obviously that's going to impair us in terms of creating our own budget. So that'll impact every university in the SUS. So I'm sure that Marshall and Chairman Kitson are looking at those contingencies, and as well as we are, and we will have to adjust accordingly, given what the governor does with signing of the budget, and obviously the impact of the federal money on our budget too.
Right. Yeah, President, I think maybe the next call we have with the Chancellor and with the BOG chairman, we sort of start maybe laying out new, maybe an interim budget period, a July, August budget, not try to project the whole 2021 calendar, fiscal year, because I don't think that
that'll be Monday.
Have that information by June 30th, and that may affect our Board of Trustees scheduling meeting. We may have another meeting in July or August, but
exactly.
So we'll have that conversation with the Chancellor and the BOG chair, and then Kyle, you let us know what your peers are saying. But it sure seems to me that this may be a year that requires an interim budget before we pass a final budget. So we'll go from there. All right. Any other questions? And that is a great report, and certainly the sensitivity testing is informative. I guess so we'll just have to see how those impacts come out. Any other questions for Kyle or Trustee Sasser? Thank you again for that great work. We're going to move on to our audit and compliance thing. We have Sam McCall and our Chief Audit Officer, Robin Blank. Our Chief Compliance Officer, Robert Blank, with us, and that's chaired by George Gonzalez. So, George, I'll hand it to you, and you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very brief. The offices of the Chief Audit Officer, Sam McCall, and the offices of the Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer, Robin Blank, are open for business. They're working remotely, obviously. It's been working very well. Work is being done. Reports are being issued. They're keeping the university in full compliance and also supporting other departments as needed. There are no action items that we need for today. Two quick updates. Robin's office recently completed the list of Form 1 filers for the Florida Commission of Ethics. Those forms are going to be going out pretty soon. The deadline, I believe, is July 1st. Second quick update, on March 27th, the Auditor General of the state of Florida issued a report on compliance and financial controls over financial reporting and federal awards. And we're glad to report that no findings of non-compliance were issued, which is a big deal for the university. And everybody worked very hard on that report. So other than that, I know both Sam and Robin are on the phone, and I would like to ask them, maybe Sam first and Robin second, if they want to add anything. Sam?
Sam, are you there? Are you with us?
I think I'm here now.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. The main thing I would like to say is that we continue to issue reports. We're trying to be mindful that everyone at the university is currently working on the COVID-19 issue, so we're trying to be all the priorities that they have. We recently issued 3 ITS audits. 2 are public, 1 is non-public, because it has a lot of information we would not like someone else to know about. We issued an audit recently on the College of Law. We issued an audit on graduate fee waivers. We issued an audit on follow-up, which we do every 6 months. And I also, as Kyle mentioned, offered, and he took me up on my offer, and I looked at President's Hall and meal plan refunds. So all of that went well. We have ongoing work. We're looking at the College of Engineering, the Mag Lab. We're just starting an audit on admissions. We're doing another audit on ITS. But things are going as well as we can hope for with us. We appreciate staff support. I've said in every interest conference that if we ask questions and they're working on priority items, just let us know, and we will get back with them and get the answers when they have time to provide them to us.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Robin, anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to let you know that we continue to be available for any compliance issues related to the university's COVID-19 response. And we have got a couple of major projects that fortunately lend themselves pretty well to working remotely, including a large-scale project on with the Office of Distance Learning regarding programs that lead to professional licensure or certification. So that's rolling, it's going really well. Also, please keep an eye on your mailboxes at your homes for your Form 1s from the Commission on Ethics. We'll send out obviously a reminder before the July 1st deadline. And if you have any questions about those forms, feel free to give me a shout. Also, the conflict of interest, foreign influence on research issue continues to be an item of interest. Obviously, the legislature, like many of us, have been preoccupied with the COVID-19 response, but we do expect that the select committee will meet probably during the time in between the sessions, and we'll continue to provide them information and make updates to our policies, forms, et cetera, in response to some of the legislation that came out of that committee. I'm happy to take any questions, but other than that, let y'all get back to the business of the board.
Thank you, Robin. Trustee Gonzalez.
Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions, we'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Sam. I will go to our athletics director, David Coburn, to give us an update on athletics or lack thereof. Both of them are connected. David Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Considering that we don't have any athletics going on, there's a lot to talk about with you. I thought I'd start with a little recap of where we finished in the rankings of teams that were in season when the plug was pulled on March 15th. Baseball was ranked 13th, men's basketball 4th, women's basketball 19th, beach volleyball 3rd. Men's golf 39th, women's golf 22nd, softball 12th, men's tennis 28th, and women's tennis 2nd. So we were poised, obviously, to have a very good spring. Probably would have finished, if you include outdoor men's and women's track, which had not begun and therefore not listed there, but they were both going to be excellent. We probably would have had a good chance to finish with every spring sport in the top 25. But then again, that's why they actually play the games, is to determine that. But we were in good shape at that point. To move on to some substantive matters, NCAA and ACC issues, the name, image, and likeness issue continues to be a point of discussion. It will be on the agenda for discussion next week at the NCAA council meeting, but there is no vote scheduled. I think the NIL working group report is due into the NCAA by the end of this month sometime. I don't anticipate that there will be a vote on that in the near future, but again, it's been hard to determine on that one. I think there are some unresolved issues relating to, in particular, recruiting and how that might impact recruiting processes that still have to be worked through. The transfer working group at the NCAA level for undergraduates has come to some conclusions that blanket exemption for one-time transfer for undergraduates will be discussed at the council meeting on the 24th next week. Anticipated vote will be in the meeting on May 20th. The way that looks is it would provide substantial increase in flexibility for student athletes for a one-time transfer, provided certain criteria are met regarding academic status and so on. That, I believe, is going to pass. There is a vote next week on the 24th on the graduate transfer proposal, which would confer considerably more flexibility on graduate students who are transferring in terms of the degrees for which they could enroll in their new schools. That will be helpful to those graduate students who are transferring. It will allow them to have access to another undergraduate major or minor or some other options. Spring sport eligibility. I'm sure you're all aware that the NCAA voted to give spring sports student athletes in all 4 classes an additional year of eligibility with scholarship aid. We have been working through that issue with our coaches and continue to do so. It looks as though we're going to have around 20 seniors this year who are interested, perhaps a couple more than that, who are interested in another year. And we continue to work with our coaches on the numbers. We just received some guidance regarding initial eligibility for student athletes coming in the fall. Given the absence or the limited availability of standardized testing opportunities, the ACT and the SAT have been shut down and have not yet resumed. It looks as though if certain other academic criteria are met, the requirement for test scores will be waived. This, of course, is an issue that's going to affect next year's applicants for admission as well. And that's going to affect all students, not just student athletes. On the budget and finance side, it's been an interesting year, starting with a hurricane in working through football season and football transition, and now the virus. No shortage of opportunities. The NCAA and ACC distribution will be reduced. I think you've probably read quotes from other ACC athletics directors, somewhere between $2.2 and $2.5 million reduction based on the loss of the NCAA and the ACC basketball tournaments. So there will obviously be savings associated with the cancellation of spring sports. We're still working through the numbers on those, but there will be some substantial savings, and that will, both of those numbers will impact our end of current fiscal year status. There are cost savings analyses underway both here and at the ACC level. The ACC has set up a working group to explore possible conference-wide initiatives for departments and entire sports to potentially save money across the board for all teams. These would include things such as travel, scheduling guidelines, practices. There are also potential across the board NCAA cost saving changes coming. And I don't know what those will look like yet in either case, but we're anticipating those. We are planning to develop several different budget scenarios for next year. I don't think any of them will be pretty. One of them will be a scenario without football. And I would just say, God help us if that is the scenario. I do want to say thank you for the coaches and the staff and the student athletes. They've been wonderful going through this situation. They've been very understanding and flexible. They've been very supportive. I know there is a lot of anxiety, particularly among the coaches and the student athletes, about when we will be back and how that's going to work. But notwithstanding that, they've been very, very supportive and understanding. And I wanted to say publicly how much those of us who are trying to put this thing together here appreciate that. Fall schedule planning. We are developing some principles within the ACC to guide us if we need to adjust the football schedule. They have set up an ad hoc ACC working group, which includes Coach Norvell, to review return to play models in concert with the NCAA football oversight committee and the American Federation, the American Football Coaches Association. The NCAA has developed a COVID-19 advisory panel comprised of medical experts. The subgroup of this panel has been working on national guidelines for return to play. One of the things we're going to have to do in the event that we have to move football, say, to the spring, is coordinate and align with the NFL schedule. They obviously have the draft and the pre-draft activities associated with what they do. And we're going to have to figure out how to make that fit if we do indeed have to move football to the spring. And the Senior Women's Administrators Group in the ACC is reviewing Olympic sports scheduling models to see what we need to do if we are delayed in the fall with the Olympic sports as well as football. In terms of student athlete support, rehab continues both in-house and remotely for injured athletes or athletes coming off of surgery. That continues to go well. Academic advising and tutoring are full bore online. Mental health services and personnel remain available. Mental health has been swamped, as you could probably anticipate. I've been trying to figure out how I can sneak in to see Dr. K myself, and haven't managed to do that yet. Nutrition and strength staff are active and engaged remotely. And we have, I believe, deployed all the technology hardware necessary to the student athletes and addressed any known remote connectivity issues that they have. I think we're in pretty good shape there. Certainly the academic folks seem happy with where we are. Current sport operations. Non-physical activities currently are permitted in all sports. Conditioning and weight training must be on their own and cannot be directed. Right now, non-physical activities such as virtual meetings, film review, chalk talks can be supervised up to 8 hours per week. All of that is voluntary at FSU right now. Recruiting has gone virtual, as I'm sure you can imagine. The most recent signing period opened on Wednesday, the 15th. We signed 6 student athletes across 4 different sports on that day. And as you are no doubt aware, we have received numerous verbal commitments from prospects in different sports, which obviously by rule I can't talk about specifically. I will say that Coach Semrau signed 3 transfers who will be very helpful to her. Leonard signed a 7-footer. I would say to you that Leonard probably is not finished, but then I'm not sure Leonard is ever finished with recruiting. So with regards to the boosters, the BOG at their last meeting approved the College Town refinancing proposal that you approved in your virtual meeting in March. That went well. The boosters have moved the ticket priority and the annual funding deadline to May 1 and have replaced the annual spring golf tour with weekly virtual one-on-ones with Coach Norvell. He has proved to be very adept at those, and those are going well. We are moving to online ticketing and parking processes. The president has, on behalf of his generation, approved both of those, although I'm not sure it's entirely fair for him to be approving them since neither apply to him, but nevertheless. We are working on budget cuts for the operating budget for the boosters, just as we are for the athletics department, and those are going as well as can be expected. We're working well with the booster staff. The universal search for the replacement for Andy Miller continues slowly. We are still discussing schedule and hope to have a replacement for Andy in place by this fall. Some other miscellaneous items, media and social media, the pace has picked up with that. As you can imagine, the coaches and the student athletes have done over 230 interviews with local, state, and national media. I've been very, very pleased and proud of the way they've stepped up. We've done twice per week postings of in-depth spotlights on individual student athletes, sharing those from all social media platforms, and they've been very well received. Statewide radio broadcast of classic football games from the last 15 years featuring Gene Deckerhoff. And then the last thing I wanted to tell you is we have a couple of special things going on Saturday, which was the date originally scheduled for the spring game. On Saturday morning, we have a video that Jason Dennard and Seminoles Productions put together. It's 4 minutes long. I've viewed it. It is really entertaining. It's basically of some views of our empty facilities here, interspersed with some game and practice shots and some voiceover. So you're going to see things associated with the facilities full and the facilities empty. That's going to go out Saturday morning, tomorrow morning at around 10 on all social media channels, and will be emailed to about 200,000 folks in our databases, including you. So that I would encourage you to look at that. It's very well done. And they have also worked very hard on putting together a simulated spring game that will be live streamed on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to begin at 5 o'clock in the evening, which it was when the spring game was supposed to kick off. Our line coach, Coach Atkins, and Wally Ami, a former defensive lineman, We'll square off in a video game that features the Garnet versus the Gold, and it will look like Florida State and Doak Campbell Stadium. And it will probably take about 40 minutes to view. And I think you will also hear their voices talking about their strategy and what they're doing. So we're hoping to provide a little entertainment for the fan base in lieu of the game itself. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that, and a lot going on. I know you've been dealing with a tremendous amount. And we appreciate the fine job you've been doing. I didn't ever think that virtual football would be the highlight of what's going on at Florida State, but we'll be looking forward to seeing that tomorrow afternoon, I guess. And last night I had the pleasure of watching the 1999 National Championship game on the ACC Network. And those who missed it, Florida State beat Virginia Tech 46-29. So it was quite a good game. So
that was my only comment. I don't see enough FSU football programming on the ACC Network. I keep looking. So David, get on that.
What they've been doing is they've been picking days and giving each school an entire day to take over and show programming. And they're going to keep revolving through each school.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for David? Thank you very much, David. Kathleen, are you with us? Give us a little update on the legislative session.
I am here, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you very much. And members of the board. Much has already been said, so I'll just try and recap here. As the president said, session officially ended on Thursday, March 19th, when legislators came back to pass the $93.2 billion state budget for the next fiscal year. For us, I'll reiterate, that includes about 21 million in recurring base money. 15 is for national ranking, 5 for, where is that? Five for the Florida Institute on Child Welfare and 1 for the Institute of Politics, plus 20 million in PICO dollars for the College of Business Legacy Hall. As was mentioned already, the governor has not yet received that bill. There is much speculation as to when he will, why he has not. We are following that very carefully, and I will make sure everybody knows when he receives it and when he acts on it. As we all know and have heard, that bill goes into effect on July 1, so he'll need to receive it and act on it before then, obviously. There were 3,518 bills filed for the 2020 session. 210 of those bills passed. The governor has received 16 of those 210 bills right now. So that just kind of indicates that he's busy doing other things. He has signed those 16. One of them is a tax package that includes a 3-day back-to-school tax holiday for early August and a disaster preparedness tax break from end of May to early June. There are 2 bills that passed for us during the legislative session that we're keeping an eye on. The governor has not yet received those. One is a comprehensive higher education bill, Senate Bill 72 by Senator Stargell, that has some language in it that allows the universities to use carry forward for expenses incurred during a declared state of emergency, which could be helpful for us. It also includes the conflict of interest foreign influence language that Robin Blank mentioned earlier, and it creates, has some language that creates the Florida Institute of Politics at FSU that we received some money for already. A couple of bills that did not, one other bill that did pass that we're waiting for the governor to receive is the name, image, and likeness bill on a state level that David mentioned, and it will take effect on July 1 as well. So the governor probably needs to get a hold of that one. There was a memo that Senate President Galvano released yesterday, very late in the day, and it talked about a lot of the issues of the day, trying to recap some of what's been happening and keeping members updated. I thought that the most interesting thing, there were a lot of interesting things. It had national economic outlook information in it, had some information about some Moody's forecast for the state of Florida that they're kind of trying to watch and have the state economist review. And there were some key upcoming dates on general revenue collection reports that are going to be interesting and that are probably going to help the governor when he receives his bill. I think the first one is April 23rd, and that is going to report on things that are almost pre-COVID for the state. But the next one will be on May 11th, and that would be a post coronavirus impact, and it will encompass data from April, and that might be telling. The next one after that might be significant would be on June 25th, which is a general revenue collection report for May on sales tax activity. So those are things that we'll look forward to and probably won't look all that great. I also wanted to mention, I don't think I've mentioned this before, just for the record, that trustees Sasser and Thiel were confirmed by the Senate during the last week of the regular 2020 session, and they both know that already, so that's not a surprise to them. And as has been mentioned, we'll wait to see when all of this fiscal information comes forward, when a special session will be called. We're told there probably will be one. We just don't know when. As Kyle and Amy mentioned, and everybody mentioned, I'm also watching the CARE Act, the federal money discussions, very carefully, along with my colleagues around the state and our federal lobbyists as well. I continue to field inquiries from legislators and their staff and the governor's office about our residence hall move out details, and prior to the refunds being issued, I was receiving calls on that. As you know, our students are scattered all over the state now at home, and so our legislators are hearing from the families. The final legislator will be distributed as soon as the bills have been acted on and the budget has been signed. I will send that out to all of you when that is done. And that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kathleen. A lot happened. Now we're pending some final action. It'd be nice to know how that's going to play out, but I think everyone's waiting as long as possible to get all the information possible to make decisions. Any questions for Kathleen? If not, thank you, Kathleen. We'll go to Dr. Jennings on our university advancement update.
Thank you, Chairman Burr. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today virtually. I'm going to try to share my screen here to show a PowerPoint that we've distributed in advance. See, I'm not seeing it. Are you all seeing this?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. So I'm going to describe a little bit about the ways that the advancement DSOs have accommodated the online change, and then go through some of the traditional numbers that we have, and then talk about how we're matching up versus national trends. We've moved our staff online. We've moved our solicitations online. We've moved our content online. So there's a lot happening. I know this first slide is just a photo, but that's probably about the right number of people at Westcott Fountain right now, given what's going on there. Do y'all see the next slide? It's for some reason, okay, for some reason it's not showing up on my computer quite right. Okay, so the FSU Foundation moved everyone online. We launched our Support Our Students campaign and reimagined the Great Give. And we had planned to do the Great Give one day, 36-hour online giving, March 23rd. We were a little worried that that would appear tone deaf given all that was going on. And so we pivoted and reimagined it and focused it on our student emergency fund. And I'll talk a little bit about the statistics at the end of my presentation there, but I want to congratulate our staff. The punchline is we received over $438,000 in a very short period of time, and the FSU Foundation board stepped up with about $70,000 of that amount. Several members of the University Board of Trustees or your companies also contributed. And so that was a great collaborative thing by everyone on our team and at the university. We are continuing to develop a strategic plan at the FSU Foundation. We started that process. We're being cognizant of everything that's going on as well in the environment, but my belief is that we need to have a plan or there's the potential of drift. And so we're moving forward and engaging the foundation board in that process as the lead entity, but also there's a draft plan that's out right now to the deans and president's cabinet for review. And we'll get their feedback and present that to the FSU Foundation board coming up. We're also starting to launch virtual fundraising events in addition to having moved a lot of our donor contact to phone calls and online. Certainly the development officers at Boosters and Foundation are both finding good success with reaching people at home, both by phone and some Zoom meetings. It still remains to be seen how that's going to translate into gift productivity, but we're working hard at that. Next up, the Alumni Association, of course, also moved online. We had to cancel quite a number of events there. They've begun moving to virtual content, like you heard the Seminole Boosters and Athletics are doing. One of the examples of that is Webinar Wednesday, and we're trying to produce academic content, some that's related to the COVID-19 situation and some that's not. Our sense is that people have lots of ways to connect with COVID-19 and they might be ready for a break in some of these other areas. So we're trying to be broad in how we approach that. One of the key things we're hearing from alumni is they're sensitive to the fact that many of our graduates and some of our current students may have had jobs or internships that were either canceled or rescinded or postponed, and it's affecting them significantly. So the Office of Career Services, which falls under Student Affairs, partners closely with alumni to make sure that we're reaching out to our now 360,000, soon to be 368,000, I think, living alumni after we graduate some more on May 2nd. But we want to help them get connected with internships, which need to be virtual internships at this point, or with jobs in the market sectors that might still be hiring. So we're appealing to all of our volunteers and our alumni generally to help identify those kinds of opportunities. And so this is just a quick slide that talks about how alumni can help. And this is one of the key ways that you and others can really make a difference in the lives of our students who are graduating right now. So you may or may not know that the Career Services Office also offers its services to alumni. So you don't have to be a current student to take advantage of many of the services that Myrna Hoover and her team offers. So I want to shout out to them and appreciate that. The Real Estate Foundation, also online, of course. They were, as far as I can know, was the first full DSO board to hold its meetings via Zoom. Kevin Graham and his team working with local elected officials, city and county staff to work on the updating the convention center project. And there's the updated investment. There's the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency approved a significant increase in its funding plans. And that updated investment contemplates approximately $40 million for design and additional construction designs, and an additional potential $13 million for the cost of bonding. and the original estimate investment contemplated by Blueprint was in the $20 million range. So this is a significant increase to help kickstart the convention center arena district area once we're back online. You'll recall that the Real Estate Foundation moved into 200 West College Avenue, which is sort of catty corner from the FSU Foundation's new building near on Duval and College here. And they're in conversation with the owner of that building, potentially purchasing that and using the rental fees to sustain that going forward. That's something we'll continue the conversation internally and bring that back to the University Board of Trustees at a subsequent meeting if that continues to move forward. We also have at least 4 properties in process and under discussion right now, several houses and 1 commercial development area that Real Estate Foundation is working through. In our efforts to keep board members, we've got a lot of volunteers at the DSOs, and also the colleges have their own individual advisory boards and development committees. We've been working very hard to continue to communicate or over communicate, I hope, what we're doing to give them confidence that FSU is doing all the things necessary to survive and thrive during the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis over the last month or so. And so this is just a list of some of the things that we've been doing. ThankView, the second to the last item there, is a video application where we're able to send out videos to individual donors to thank them for gifts. We're able to use that for invitations, and we're really increasing the amount of video content that we send out to our donors and our prospective donors. Our development officers, as I mentioned, are moving individually their Zoom contacts. And we've actually, over the last month, the foundation itself has closed over 13 major gifts with gift agreements that have been documented digitally. So we were already moving toward a digital document signing process for gift agreements. The COVID-19 situation really pushed us fully into that, and it's been embraced by everyone, including our donors. So I appreciate that. But anyway, 13 over the last month, even though our development officers have really been taking the approach of, I'll call them wellness checks. That is making sure we're keeping in touch with our donors, but not doing any hard solicitations unless the donor indicates their interest in moving in that direction. Of course, development officers will follow that lead. I wanted to give you a sense of what happened after the global financial crisis in 2008 to giving. This situation we're in right now, of course, is different from that, but there may be some lessons to learn there. 4 main points came out as a result of that. First thing is that giving at the top of the gift pyramid took a disproportionately big hit. Giving at the top of the gift pyramid almost always follows the stock market or that particular donor's assets, appreciated assets, whether those are real estate or stocks. And after the global financial crisis, those donors took a enormous hit. So what this this study looked at about 1,300 institutions, and they took out the 3 largest individual gifts at those institutions, and they found that those top 3 gifts from 2008 to 2009 decreased by 33%. So, and those 3 gifts can often make a huge difference in the total of gifts in a given year. And the gifts I'm talking about are also gifts and commitments, not just cash gifts, but these could be bequests, they could be planned gifts, they could be midterm pledges. It's the total commitments we're talking about that declined by 33%. Second thing is, as you know, alumni participation has been declining steadily for the last 25 years, but right after the global financial crisis, it declined another 1.5%, and stayed down after that point. So we can anticipate some challenges there. Also, unrestricted giving fared especially poorly, but restricted giving increased. So some of the gifts that people used to give unrestricted then became more restricted after the global financial crisis. So we might anticipate some of that this coming year, especially if our students continue to have need, or if our staff and faculty become financially stressed, you can imagine that a number of donors might direct their gifts in those areas. So we're going to look at that. So what we found, the punchline of all that is, if you can create an immediate, tangible, and clear impact for those donors, then you're much more likely to be successful. General things that our development officers and our alumni team are working on: sensitive, understanding, and flexible. We've obviously pivoted a lot. We want to be sensitive to what our donors and our alumni are going through. We want to engage them in all kinds of dialogue, keep connected, let them know that we're here for them, just like they've always been there for us, and we're going to stay engaged with them. We're also making sure that we use our time now the most productive as possible. So for a lot of the development officers, that means really going in a deep dive on their list of prospective donors they're working with, reassessing the strategies for those folks in light of the unknowns still, but trying to move forward and with the strategies for engaging those donors as we come out of this pandemic situation. There's one of the top consulting firms in the country has been doing a survey for the last several weeks about how different advancement teams are handling the coronavirus situation, and the generally negative outlook for fundraising, but it tends to ease as over the next 90 days as we hopefully come out of this and maybe get back to the point of individual visits or some easing of our physical distancing. Most have transitioned to remote solicitations. The others either aren't, I don't know what they're doing if they're not doing remote solicitations. Some of those might have just halted solicitations altogether. 68% transitioned to some or all donor visits to a remote format. We, of course, at FSU, we've transitioned to 100% remote donor visits. And of course, we've canceled a lot of events. This weekend, we had, today, in fact, we had planned to do a DSO summit, including the University Board of Trustees, and we had to pull the plug on that, which basically eliminated several months of work by several people as we canceled those events for this week and this weekend. And then most people are, at this point, our development advancement colleagues envisioning that we're going to return to some sort of events by this fall. Most have implemented a hiring freeze. Some have started having to reduce salaries, and some are actually adding digital gift officer roles. And they were considering this even before the coronavirus hit, but now moving in this direction, just because so much more of our contact with donors is going to be online. And we're having these conversations at the FSU Foundation about what's the new way of interacting with donors coming out of this crisis. And I could see us moving in this direction as well. So I'm not going to read all of the other ones, but you can see that we're talking about lowering goals, budget cuts. We've postponed our pledge reminders so that we're not sending out pledge reminders during this crisis, and doing wellness checks on donors. The CARES Act, this has been talked about in the other context, which is money coming toward the universities. We're also aware that the CARES Act has eased up some of the tax burden on donors who might want to make gifts now. So for those donors who are considering cash gifts this year, you used to be able to deduct up to 60% of your adjusted gross income with carry forward for 5 years. This year, those donors may claim up to 100% of their AGI. And then subsequent years, my understanding is you're still able to carry forward the 60% of your AGI in the subsequent years up to 5 years if you make a long-term pledge. So this is, we're using this with individual donors who may be in the situation where they can make a cash gift and provide some tax advantages for them. There's also an above the line $300 universal charitable contribution deduction for those taxpayers, regardless whether you itemize tax your charitable deductions. You'll recall that the federal government changed the tax code 2 years ago, which basically increased the standard deduction for most individuals and married couples filing jointly. And so this is going to be, even folks that claim that standard deduction will be able to claim an additional $300 of universal of charitable tax deductions if they make those gifts to a public charity, which all of our DSOs qualify as. And then finally, the increased limit on deductions for cash gifts to a public charity from corporations. Corporations now able to deduct 25% of those cash gifts in this year instead of the normal 10%. So as we're in conversations with those donors, we're going to be bringing up this to try to encourage gifts this year. Real quickly through our numbers, the bottom line here, 99 million as of April 10th. This is down about 5% from last year. That's in part due to timing of a couple of gifts. And you'll notice that the Seminole Boosters have had an incredible year, and that was due to an effort that Seminole Boosters and David Coburn, President Thrasher, engaged in called the Renaissance Campaign, approaching a number of donors for significant gifts to help in the coaching transition this year and to help make sure that athletics stays robust as we make that transition. So they've had great success. These numbers, you'll recall, are gifts and pledges. So they also include bequests and 5-year pledges that people have made. So these are commitment figures. Next slide, this just shows where the money comes from. I'm not going to go through this. This is pretty normal from our previous years. You'll see the pledge number is up a little higher, perhaps than normal, 48 million. And this again reflects the number of Seminole Booster pledges that came as a result of that, the Renaissance and Unconquered campaigns. The endowment, we've been watching this very closely. Each of the DSOs that listed here has its own endowment committee and its own council on this. Just for context, at December 31st, the overall endowment was $731 million, now down to 622 as of March 30. And these are estimates because several of the organizations haven't gotten the full final numbers from their individual managers to show what the total is. So these are our best estimates from this. The FSU Foundation dropped from roughly 533 million to 451 million. The FSU Foundation Investment Committee has met twice to look at the situation, especially as the market was in free fall in mid-March, and made a couple of minor adjustments to take advantage of what they saw potential upside in the equities markets by transitioning some fixed income and hedge funds into more public equity plays there. And the timing of that was pretty good. I looked before the meeting started, the S&P 500 was up 1.4% just for today. As most of you know, it's rebounded a bit. When we were making some of these kinds of phone calls about whether we should reposition, the S&P 500 at that point in late March had dropped 19.5% by March 31st. I would say too that the rebounding has been helpful just out of perspective. On April 17th, 2019, the S&P 500 was at 2,900, and today, before this call or during this call, it was at 2,840. So it's really 1%, just slightly above 1% lower than it was a year ago. So it's dropped, yes, but it's also rebounded from a year ago. With donors and fundraising, it's about perspective. People are still feeling a lot of uncertainty. There's still a lot of volatility in the markets. Y'all are more expert. We've got a couple of real experts on the call in investments, so I'm not going to try to go too deep there, but we're watching this closely, and all of the DSOs have capable people who are paying attention to a lot of these important issues. We're also prepared to communicate any bad news that we're going to have to donors in case any of our endowment funds drop underwater. That is, drop below where the market value drops below the historic gift value that the donors gave. And so we've been through this before in 2009, 2010, and 11, and we're prepared to have those kind of communications with donors again. Okay. And just finally, a couple of financial highlights. I want to close with these two things. This Support Our Students campaign was $438,000 in the 24-hour period. We've still received some gifts, and now it's up to $464,000. As VP Hecht mentioned, we've already distributed $330,000 of that to the students. There's also about another $100,000 in the pipeline to be distributed to students. And so we've almost already exhausted this fund. And so we're going to continue raising money for this. We're also going to make sure we understand what the CARES Act provides our students in terms of aid so that we can target the philanthropy dollars in the most effective and strategic way we can. This effort, though, in addition to the money it raised for students, almost 2,500 unique donors made 2,700 gifts. Some of us gave twice to this. Almost 600 new donors. This is really incredible. We're excited about that. And then some of the other statistics you see there. We had a couple of $10,000 gifts as part of this effort. And there were a couple of faculty and staff members who really made stretch gifts through this process too. And I'm so proud to see that as well, because the campus community stepped up in a big way to make sure that we're supporting our students. And finally, just put some numbers around the Seminole Boosters fundraising effort to piggyback on David's report. Through the Unconquered campaign, which is co-chaired by John Crow and Nyla Thompson, they've received $91.6 million in gifts and pledges, and $20.4 million of that in cash and real estate received to date. And then they've collected over $4 million since January. And then we'd asked about the website where people can go to contribute to the Student Emergency Fund. The best way to get there is to go through the FSU main website, fsu.edu. And then on the right-hand side toward the top of the screen, it says ways to help our students. Click on that button. It'll take you to a giving page. You can direct your gift to the Tallahassee campus, to the Panama City campus, or to the food pantry. The food pantry those gifts don't go directly to the FSU Foundation or to FSU. It goes to a third party, so we can't count those as gifts to the university, but those are important gifts because some of our students remain food stressed, and we want to make sure that we can help alleviate those concerns for those food stressed students. Last thing I'd say is our friends at the Ringling Museum and the Ringling Museum Foundation, the Ringling's been closed for the last month also, but even though they're closed, they still say, go Noles. So thank you, that's my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Tom. Any questions for Dr. Jennings? I think that's great work in a very trying time, Tom. It's, I think, cultivating. I think the boosters doing the same thing, thanking people for being with us. Hopefully they'll be with us in the future. I think it's a good time to do that. And I think monitoring certainly the endowment funds and what's this market's doing to it. March 31st, a tough time. I think it's been some good rebound since then. So we'll continue to make progress. If there's no other questions for Tom, we'll move on to Dr. Ostrander, our VP of Research. Gary?
Good morning, and I'm going to, okay, my screen's not popping up. I don't know if I've been authorized yet or not. And if not, I'll go without. Okay, I'm just gonna, can you folks see that?
We see you.
Oh, you see me? Well, that's too bad. All right, let's go without. It's not coming through. I'm sorry we're not all meeting in person, but we're all doing the best we can. And I thank everybody for staying around to hear the research summary. I passed out, for the benefit of folks who don't have the handout or can't see the PowerPoint, the research funding slide, the number slide. We're about even through 3/4 of our fiscal year, the first 3 quarters, in terms of proposals being submitted and the number of awards made. We show a big drop in federal dollars of a little over 11 million, and it would show us, just based on this slide, being about $14.8 million behind. The reality, and I show on my next slide, is that we just received an award document last Friday from the National Science Foundation for an expected payment of $12.6 million for the core grant for the Mag Lab. Normally, that payment would have come in already. So while technically the numbers show us behind, 12.6 million is going to be hitting our books, which puts us a lot closer to being on track. I was also copied on an email this week from a federal agency that has just announced that they are approving a $10 million award to one of our centers. That award document will hit our campus within 2 weeks. This is 10 million new dollars. This isn't replacing anything from last year. This is new monies. So those two together, I think, put us in a very good place as we're going into the last quarter. And barring anything unforeseen, I expect we're going to finish the fiscal year around the same as last year, which of course was the all-time record year for us. The last few weeks, we've been focused on ramp down activities. Up until about April 1, we were trying to find ways to allow researchers to get out in the field, to get in their labs. So we were de-densifying. We had folks working on shifts. We were using personal protective equipment. When it became apparent that COVID-19 is being spread to a significant extent by the asymptomatic individuals, we shifted gears, and what we've been doing now is trying to get everybody off the campus and get folks working from home as best they can. But the goal is to have no researchers physically on the campus. We did open up and say, is there any essential research that has to be done? And we accepted proposals, applications from across the campus for anybody who felt their research was essential. We approved very few of those, and those that we did approve included projects that were directly related to COVID-19, of which we have some in the STEM disciplines, we have some in the social sciences, they're important. We approved clinical activities or clinical research where there was a potential harm to participants if we were to stop. Think clinical trial with a drug, think some of the kinds of work we do in psychology. We also approved activities where there would be a safety hazard if we stopped. So it turns out you really can't just lock the doors to the chemistry building, the Mag Lab, the Centers for Advanced Power Systems, and walk away for 4 to 6 weeks and hope for the best. That equipment runs 24 hours a day. A lot of it is under vacuum. Some of the equipment requires a constant supply of liquid nitrogen, liquid helium. It would be a huge safety issue for the facilities and for the community if, in fact, we just walked away. And finally, we entertained proposals from any faculty members that had research projects that if we stopped them, there would be a severe loss of data, a severe cost, and it would be, a major problem. Case in point, we have a faculty member that right now has on campus mice that flew on the International Space Station. He's interested in working on some physiology experiments. That is not the kind of experiment you can stop midstream, because you can imagine the expense of trying to get mice back up on the space station. We have faculty members that are growing crystals that take 6 months to grow. They're 5 months into it. We have faculty members doing field work that they would lose literally years of data if they were to stop collecting data right now. There's very few of these projects active. We've enacted further, more stringent safety guidelines for those folks when they're on campus. They're staggered. And as the last 2 weeks have been going by, the numbers are continuing to drop as folks finish up what they're doing. I've also, and my office has worked really hard to keep communication with our research community. We are still submitting a lot of proposals. We submit about 1,300 a year. Grants are still coming in at a steady rate. We've already had about 800, 750 come in this year. That activity is all happening. That money needs to get distributed. The activities need to get underway, contracts put in place, etc. I've hosted a weekly research continuity Zoom meeting each of the last 4 weeks. The average attendance has been over 150. We begin with an overview on research issues from the national level, and I always call my director of federal relations our Director of Federal Relations, just before the meeting to find out the latest of what's happening on the Hill and what's happening with agency funding. We look at what's happening locally in the state and in the community and on campus, and then we open up the rest of the meeting to Q&A. We use the chat function in Zoom, and I and my 2 associate VPs for research attempt to answer questions in real time coming in from the 150 plus participants. Those that we can answer, we have it right there in the log, and we follow up after the meeting with them. Our sponsored research administration and the Research Foundation have held a couple of Zoom meetings for all the folks who deal with the compliance and the financial side of these activities. As you've known from my past presentations, we do an awful lot of human subjects research, a couple thousand protocols active at any one time, ranging from human clinical trials with drugs to graduate students directing art therapy. We've held Zoom meetings for folks that are working on the human subjects with our Office of Human Subjects to keep their work going. We specifically have stopped all trials that involve human-to-human interaction, or all studies that involve human-to-human interaction, lest they fell in that category I mentioned earlier, where there would be a potential harm to subjects not being allowed to participate. About a month ago, I put together a COVID-19 Research Issues Committee. We have someone from HR, someone from Environmental Health and Safety. It's chaired by our Associate VP for Research, Laura Fulkerson. And then we went out and identified 5 or 6 faculty members that are, first of all, respected scholars in their field. Secondly, highly respected on campus. And third, have a reputation of being able to appreciate and work with diverse points of view. These folks have been advising me and advising our office as we work through some really difficult decisions. It's really tough to say to a graduate student or a faculty member, no, we can't have you on campus right now, or no, we can't allow this particular activity to continue. That group is helping us think through a lot of issues, and I'll mention a couple more later. So running into my last 2 slides today, last Friday afternoon, right before what is often the Easter holiday weekend, we ran a collaborative collision for a few hours. Now, the collaborative collision is something we started at Florida State University about 4 years ago, and it's where we bring together faculty around a topic that we think covers a variety of departments and programs. So we covered things like artificial intelligence. One time we did one on disaster preparedness right after the hurricane. We've done one on smart cities, on mental health. My staff said they thought that they could do one of these virtually. In the past, we have a location on campus, we have a speaker, we have a poster exchange, information exchange, we have a social event. It runs for maybe 3 hours. So my folks got together, they pulled it all off. Last Friday at 3 o'clock, it was my privilege to welcome everybody and talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here on campus. When I started, there were 85, 87 people on the Zoom meeting. As you can see from the bottom of the screen, you can track as people are coming and going. I actually stayed in the meeting for an hour and a half until my next meeting, and the numbers fluctuated around 85 until after I left. We had a really good turnout. One of the neat things about it is we also had folks from the community. We extended invitations to agencies whose clientele are directly impacted by the COVID crisis. Because this isn't just about drug development or vaccines. This is about socioeconomic issues and just how our community functions, whether it's transportation, whether it's energy, and whether it's social issues. One of the speakers really made an interesting point. She pointed out that folks aren't able to pay their rent, and we understand that. But she also pointed out that folks that own the apartment buildings aren't able to pay their mortgage. So this is a much more complicated issue than some folks might at first glance think. Wonderful collaborative collision event, STEM faculty, arts faculty, social sciences. Coming out of that, last night we soft launched, and today we will formally launch a collaborative collision seed grant program around COVID-19. The application deadline is about 10 days from now on April 30th. We're going to fund interdisciplinary teams. Each award will be $20,000, and it's my objective to fund as many of these as we can. And the idea is they're going to have about 95 days to do their study, to do their work, focused on collecting data that, or data sets, or developing an app, or whatever they think they need to be competitive for the next round of COVID funding that we anticipate will be coming out of the federal agencies late summer, early fall. Jonathan Nurse, our Director of Federal Relations, has already been talking to agencies on the Hill, and they expect with a phase 4, or certainly by the time we get to a phase 5 stimulus package coming out of Congress, the Senate, and the President's office in DC, that there is going to be significant more dollars coming in. We know from the last fiscal crisis that those who were in position to apply for grants in the very first round did the best, because that's when the competition was the least. So our objective with this program we're rolling out today is to get our faculty prepared and ready to be able to put proposals in. Looking beyond COVID-19, I'll tell you about one thing that's not COVID related, and that's our RAMP program, RAMP Administration Management Portal. I've told you about this in the past. It's a multi-million-dollar computer application, software application that we're introducing to campus that is going to bring together pre-award, post-award proposals, all the finance, the human subjects, the animals, everything to do with research is all going to be housed and networked within this software application. Carrie Peluso was running this, and the biggest rollout of this program was to occur on July 1 with the grants and the proposal module. When we went into the COVID lockdown, Carrie came to me and said, I think we can still do this. We can use the Zoom meeting. We can still keep getting everybody ready and getting prepared for this. She had successfully done something like this when she was at Emory University, so I told her to go for it, and it's been amazing. We have been having Zoom meetings with faculty who are going to have to use the program. We have been interfacing them with the developer, Huron. We've been working with the staff. We've been hosting town hall meetings by Zoom, conference calls, and we're still on pace to make the July 1 deadline. So we're excited about that. The things that are keeping me up at night is I worry about the summer. I worry that that's the time of the year that our faculty are done with their teaching. They're going back to their labs. They're going to the museums, to the archives. They're going out in the field. Like the grad student who spoke at the beginning of the board meeting today, this is a critical time for them during the summers. I don't know how we're going to get through all of that. Obviously, we're going to be limited in terms of what we can do remotely. I worry about the renewal of the research grants that fund that work. If there's any solace, it's that every other vice president in the country has the same worry right now, and everybody is facing this. Our sense is that the agencies in DC understand this, and we know that they're thinking about this and working on this issue as well. We know that there's going to be a time when we get back to campus and we get back to research. Earlier this week, I asked my research committee to start to think about how we ramp research back up. How do we get people back on campus? And we know that it's not going to be all of a sudden May 15, June 1, that we say, okay, everybody come back and resume activity. We're going to have more stringent safety protocols in place. We're going to have to stagger people when they're on campus. We're going to have to think about what experiments we're actually starting and what we're doing, because if the infection rate starts to move upward after we start to come back on campus, we know we're all going to have to leave again. So we're starting to work on that as well. We are optimistic about federal stimulus funding in the fall. We worry about that because we know the federal government also has to worry about a lot of important social programs, a lot of folks that are unemployed. I just want the board to know that we think we're best positioning ourselves to be prepared for whatever comes forward. And with that, I'll stop and see if you folks have any questions for me.
Thank you, Dr. Ostrander. I appreciate that. Any questions for Gary?
Thank you, Gary.
I think that's a great report. Looks like everywhere you can, you're moving the ball down the field, and where you can't, you're setting yourself up, being ready to be in the best position possible in things, the post-COVID-19. So I appreciate that. Members, I appreciate your diligence. We're approaching the almost 3 full hours, a little over 3.5 hours, but I appreciate we're almost towards the end. So let's just marshal on, and we'll ask our General Counsel, Carolyn Egan, to give her update.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can, yes.
Great. Thank you. In the coveted last spot, as usual, I sit and I notice that all these really, really bright, innovative staff come to us at the end when they come up with solutions to all these problems that each vice president has described today. And they say, hey, this is cool, right? And hopefully our answer is we can get them there in some way that is legally okay. But we are usually the last stop, so it makes sense probably that I'm last in order here. And we've done a lot of that in the last, whatever this, last 5 years, the last month has been. In addition to keeping our normal work going, which is really interesting to think about how to do mediations. Usually in mediations and litigation, you need 3 rooms, and 1 room everyone goes to, and then you go to your breakout sessions, and the mediator goes over here and talks with one party about a potential resolution of the case, and then goes back to the other room to talk to the other party about a potential resolution of the case. So figuring out how to do things like mediation remotely has been interesting and challenging, and something we're all trying to figure out. How to get our briefs filed, how to have hearings, how to make sure that we're staying on top of all of our litigation matters. Process servers, process servers right now still want to come give us subpoenas, and they still want to come give us legal complaints because people do still surprisingly want to sue us. So trying to conduct all that face-to-face legal business and convert all of that to what we're living with is challenging and interesting. But also helping each of the vice presidents convert their areas, worrying about the open government for this meeting. How are, people come up with great ideas, Lena and everybody works so hard to come up with some kind of logistics that work, and then come for the, hey, is this okay? Same thing with the direct support organizations. We always have our share of public records requests. Those haven't slowed down. In fact, if anything, I think they may have gone up, because there's national media wanting to know how schools are making decisions. What are we doing in order to protect the safety of our employees and our students? So we have records requests from places that we don't, typically get them unless there's a crisis. So there's the Wall Street Journal wants, every email on your campus with COVID in it somewhere. And we did all that while being down a lawyer. Unfortunately, one of our lawyers had to relocate to Pennsylvania for family reasons. But then we had the interesting task of bringing a new lawyer on board, because someone has to see about these records requests and everything through all this. So welcome to FSU, come get your remote working stuff, and then go back home. So that's interesting, bringing somebody new on board. One good thing that's come out of this in the last month or two is, while we look to our SUS colleagues a lot for guidance and making sure we have some consistency, the ACC lawyers group has gotten a lot tighter than it used to be, and are doing a lot of sharing of ideas. And Syracuse has been especially helpful because they're a few weeks ahead of us, being in New York. Even though they're about 4 hours out of New York City, they still faced a lot of these issues earlier than us. So the ACC lawyers are getting together on the phone frequently. And I find that to be very helpful, because they are Division I schools like we are. Not all of our SUS colleagues are that. So that has been really, really a good resource for all of us, I think. So the things that have been, we all had full-time jobs before the virus, right? And now we have all this extra work. So we've had a tremendous amount of contracts that we have had to seek to cancel, postpone, somehow work through contractual issues that have arisen because of the inconvenience that has occurred. And that happens with respect to opening nights on campus. Don't forget, not just the campus itself, the Ringling Museum, lots of places. So what we did is, as we're working through these contracts, is figure this is a good time to look at our contract templates and see if we are comfortable with the language. So seldom do you have to test your force majeure, your act of God, your whatever language in your contracts. You don't have to use it that often, fortunately, but we've had a lot of occasion to use a lot of it lately. So we've put together a group along with the procurement folks to look at that and to make sure that, you know, all of our language is as strong as it possibly can be, because this can happen to us and we can sometimes have to rely on it. So we're taking this time to back up and look at a lot of our contractual provisions and make sure that they're where they should be. Each time there's a new executive order, each time there's a new local order. I mean, don't forget we have, you know, 5 College of Medicine campuses around the state. We have Ringling, we have Panama City, we have campuses in all these places, and each of these legal orders, people want some understanding of how that affects our staff. You know, when our local Tallahassee order came up, right away the police want to know about the sanctions. What's the fine? It cites to an ordinance. What, you know, what's the citation I write if I have to? And they all need this information very, very quickly. With respect to the refunds, both Kyle Clark and Amy Hecht talked about the refunds. Well, those have implications on bond debt, on bond covenants, on bond reserves. And again, those decisions need to be made pretty quickly, and it's just a wide variety of questions that come up. We've been busy with dealing with the immigration status of our staff and some of our students and our faculty, because, you know, a lot of times there's very large data submissions in support of our employees who are here on work visas, oftentimes because they have specialized skills that serve our students in our campus community. So, you know, uploading those things from home can be challenging, getting someone set up to do all that. Once we have any member of our community that is affected, there's been issues about privacy, about HIPAA, about which parts of the campus are subject to HIPAA, which parts of the campus can say anything about anyone who happens to be exposed or has tested positive. So, you know, and the rules are different for different parts of the university based on whether you are a HIPAA part of the university or not. So again, you know, Finance and Administration and Human Resources has done a tremendous job on the various federal acts and creating a group. And we, you know, look at all the regulations implementing that and try to give them a final word after they work through their implementation of it. And interesting space for the university to be in. You know, we aren't usually manufacturers of products in any way. This is not something we're typically set up to do. But in our entrepreneurialness and our innovativeness, we have sought to be helpful in doing some manufacturing of masks and shields and things that can help with personal protective equipment. But along with that comes a lot of questions. What is our responsibility on the back end to users if products malfunction? The university doesn't typically manufacture things, so are we insured for that? What will our insurance provider cover in the event that one of these products that we aren't usually in the business of making, what happens with those? A lot of interesting questions that we've never asked ourselves before. You know, as a public entity, FSU has limits on its tort liability. $200,000 per person, $400,000 maximum per occurrence is the most that someone can recover in negligence cases against us. But what happens in these product liability cases, and do those damages limits that usually only apply in negligence apply here? Questions we've just never asked ourselves that are new legal questions to us. So people have been interested and kind of eager to learn these answers as we go along and to feel like they're contributing in some way. Dr. Hecht mentioned the counseling center and visits. Now that students have gone back to other states, can our Florida practitioners engage in telemedicine over state lines? And what are those rules as far as making sure that they aren't putting their licensure in jeopardy in any way? Make sure that they are authorized under all the various emergency orders to be providing those services to our students who have gone back to their homes in North Carolina or New Jersey or wherever, so that we can keep up our continuity, but also do it in ways that comply with the regulated professions. Let's see, what else? And all that while doing kind of business as usual. We still have student hearings that we usually do live. and making sure that due process is protected in terms of getting timely hearings for our students who are involved in conduct proceedings, making sure they have access to the information. You know, each student conduct case has a couple of steps in it: an information session, a file review, a final hearing. Some of those files are very, very voluminous, and they involve sometimes sensitive information that we don't just go passing out to people to keep copies of through the hearing process. So working with Amy's staff to make sure that timely hearings happen, to make sure everyone has an adequate opportunity to see all of the evidence in the file before we reach a final hearing, to adapt some of our appellate procedures in order to work remotely, and all of that, and making, you know, sometimes we've had to be flexible, and our staff has been tremendously flexible. And, you know, we have ways that we do things, but sometimes you have to look at ways to accomplish the ends in a way that's fair and open with the student. That might not be our regular way of doing business. And one other thing that we've been working on for a long time is, long time, I don't know what a long time is anymore, but a long time is to make sure that the university got a green light rating from the campus speech folks. And that is an outside organization that monitors campus speech to make sure that you are open and accessible to every speaker, regardless of point of view. And we used to every year get this not very nice letter from them that would inform us that we had a red light in terms of campus speech, which was their worst rating. And they would point out to us lots of things that they thought we were doing wrong. And we would look at it and go, oh, their interpretation of our regulations are much different than how we actually work. So we finally decided to actually go to them directly and say, look, our campus is open and accessible to everybody. You know, you're reading these regulations in ways that we don't intend for you to read them. How can we clarify? And it was a long process in getting there, because every time we thought we resolved everything with them, there were new things. But sometimes it was just language in the bulletin that they didn't like. Some of the civility language they thought was too harsh and maybe too chilling to speech that would be First Amendment protected. So we went through nearly every document that's publicly accessible that regulates our students and their speakers and their ability to host events on campus. And we were finally given the green light from them, which is their best rating for campus speech. And they publicized that on their website. We publicized it on ours. And we were very proud of that. There are not a whole lot of schools that have engaged with them directly in order to achieve that. So we did that with the help of Amy's staff, and actually also some of Sally's staff, because it involves some of our academic documents. So in other words, we're keeping the trains running, and hopefully if nothing goes wrong, people don't have to hear too much from us. But I'm always pleased with how often each of the vice presidents and their staff come to check in ahead of time and make sure that something that they're doing in this new space is appropriate and allowable. And always, they do that very frequently, and we're happy to have that relationship with everybody.
Thank you, Carolyn. Any questions for Carolyn? That was a complete overview of the many, many things that we're having to deal with that you just don't think about as a result of, we have the ongoing operations, but now the curveballs being thrown to us from COVID-19, and I appreciate it. Thank you for your good work and great efforts on behalf of Florida State University. Let me take a moment just to sort of wrap up a couple of points. And I think Carolyn's report sort of brings this home. These are challenging times for everybody in ways we never dreamed possible. It's been a 180-degree whiplash hairpin turn for all of us in our personal and private lives. And how we move through this and how we come out of this and move through it and come out the other end will really define our character. Will define who we are. And I can tell you that the university, every day, every week, is being defined and reflective of the people that you deal with on this call. The high character, high quality of individuals, the capable, their capabilities, their intelligence, and their high character is being reflected every day and every week in what this university is doing as we move through this process. And I'm proud of Florida State University, and I'm proud of how we're handling things, President, under your leadership. and dealing with the kids, dealing with the students, and dealing with the issues that continue to arise, and do that. Because it will be the measure, as we come through here, it will be the measure of all of our character in the process. I want to talk a minute about our leadership, our president. Like you all know, we extended his contract last year through November of this year. The anticipation was that sometime this year we would ramp up a search, and maybe sometime between the end of this year and next year sort of transition leadership. I am starting to have conversations with our president, and the good news is he's receptive of maybe extending his term. No one anticipated us going through this process. It would be an awful time to be doing a presidential search. It would be an awful time for a new leader to be coming in place at the end of this year. So I wanted everyone to know that I am starting to have conversations with President Thrasher. He is open to that dialogue and those conversations, which I appreciate. And probably by our June board meeting, we may have a proposal to bring to this board for consideration of further extension of his contract. And I don't want to get ahead of him. He's got his family and his life he's got to talk about, but I can just say that, and John, if you want to say anything, you can, but certainly he's been receptive and open to a conversation about extending his tenure as leading FSU, especially given this crisis that we're dealing with. So I'm grateful for that. And John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to visiting with you in detail and working out the best possible solution for you and the board and our great staff. I just say this. I think you all saw you see it every time we meet, but today I think you saw a great example. Some of the incredible things that are going on that you don't hear about on a day-to-day basis about how these issues impact us and the faculty and the staff and all the other decisions we make. This is an incredible staff. I'm blessed to be a part of it. Happy to be here. Happy to continue to work with you all as long as you all feel we're doing a good job. And I'll be happy to work with you, Mr. Chairman, on working out some details.
Thank you, President. Right now, we'll open up for open forum for any board of trustees to ask questions, bring up a topic, talk about anything that you may want to talk about.
Hey, this is Chick. I'd like to make a few comments about faculty and staff, if I may.
Certainly, Chick.
I want to point out that the majority of faculty have never taught online courses. Despite that, we were able to convert in 1 week to remote courses for the rest of this spring term. As Sally McCrory mentioned, this is thousands of courses. And I don't think anyone can overstate the level of difficulty and the size of the effort on the part of the faculty this was. And in particular, the tremendous amount of support we got from FSU administration and staff. It was quite a struggle. And it's not just been coursework, which is what seems to get a lot of the attention, but we've had to convert all of our individual student advising, student research directing to remoteness. And all the usual non-teaching academic work has gone online as well. Course development, research, grant proposals, admissions, updating and creating an awful lot of policy to deal with this unique situation we're in. It's been a tough semester, but I think we were successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chick. And certainly, we mentioned earlier, but certainly very successful. The faculty, what they have done to help continue delivering a quality education to our students and continue to move that has been a job well done and done quickly. And congratulations to you and the entire faculty, as well as the administration. Other comments or questions? Our next scheduled meeting is June 3rd and 4th. It was my hope before this one that we would be able to do that in person and be together. I think that hope is diminishing. It's not fully extinguished, but it's just a flicker. If it was ever a flame, it's just now a flicker, but we'll be communicating with you about that. Obviously, the number one concern that we continue to have is the health and safety, not only of our students, but our faculty, our entire administration, and each of you and your families as well. And that'll guide any decisions we make going forward. If there's not any other business, we will adjourn this meeting. And thank you all very much.